Okay, welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological platform where we can come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And gang, we have a show for you today. Many moons ago, years ago, mortal enemies, a battlefield littered with rhetorical corpses and champions on either side standing strong, eyeing each other across a moonlit field, swords at the ready, blood staining everything they did. Today, however, both sit before you, right? In a much more peaceful setting, a calm setting. And we're going to discuss, well, all sorts of things today. We have the wonderful BRIANNA Wu here. Welcome. And is joined by also the equally wonderful Short Fat Otaku, or Dev as he is known. Welcome to you, both of you. How are you guys doing today?
Hello.
I'm feeling it. It's been a crazy day. But I do agree, Wick. When I think of your show, I think of peace. I think of calm discussions. So I'm sure that will also happen today.
Wait, Wick, are you sure you're live?
Is it?
I'm looking at your YouTube and you're not up.
People are chatting in my space. I see. Yeah, I see faces on my live stream. YouTubers, am I live? Am I here? Can you hear me? Let's make sure. This is important.
Wick has been censored by big tech.
I might have. YouTube is up.
There we go. You just popped in. Okay.
Okay,
Oh.
it just took a minute. That sounds like a maybe a Canadian slowness. They're always a little bit behind the times. So
yeah, I'll real quickly. I'll tweet out that this is happening.
Beautiful.
Give me a second.
Thank you. But yeah, I wanted to just kind of get the temperature check, just in general. I know that there's been a lot of really heavy discourse of late online, and in spaces. So I just wanted to make sure, like, how are we feeling? BRIANNA, you privated a bunch of your stuff today. What happened?
I'm just tired of getting yelled at by my own side work. It's not more complicated than that. Though I never privated my Twitter, even during Gamergate. And that's just how bad it's been lately. Yeah, there's nothing to it. It's just, I think it's, in Dev, I don't know how you feel, but I think it's really clear that a portion of my own movement has certainly been engaged in apologia for, October 7th. And I've tried to push back on that, even though I stand with the Palestinian people. And it's just really been really unpleasant lately. So I've had enough. That's it.
You here, Dev? You alive? You with us?
I'm posting the final message.
Okay. Let's let him get his tweet out.
I've just annoyingly added everyone in my Discord.
That'll work. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
But to that, right? You've been watching this from afar. I've seen you tweet on it. I've seen you reply to posts and things. Dev, what is your take on this whole situation?
On October 7th, like the Israel.
Well, no, on the discourse surrounding it. To be clear,
right? It's cancerous.
Yeah.
But I expect that from the internet at this point. To be honest. I've seen so many news cycles where people will take the most extreme version of events, push it just outside the realm of truth, so that people who agree with them still hold on to it because it's still somewhat truthful, and then they just run with the narrative, right? Like I've seen right wingers do this with a whole bunch of things concerning Trump. I've seen left wingers do this with a whole, like, for the past 10 years, discourse has been a nightmare online, in my opinion. I'm old enough to remember what it was like before.
I think it was still bad 10 years ago. I think it was bad 15 years ago. I think it is definitely getting worse. But I think part of that is, when you and I were growing up, Dev, and I assume we're roughly the same age because the music from your videos is like Parasite Eve and Final Fantasy VIII. So I just assume you love those for the same reasons I do.
Yeah, I grew up in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the normies just were not online. It was only people like us. So I think that the addition to the cool kids has really made the internet a much worse place to be. It used to just be, sexism, and now it's terrorist apology. So that's not good.
Well, there was. I know there were definitely some real sexists back in the day, but there was also a lot of joking around too.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was hard to tell the difference between the two. But things have gotten worse for sure.
Yeah. definitely.
I guess on that note, right, like of back in the day, I guess I'll just ask this to you first, Brianna, and I'm curious what Dev would have to say. I'm again, as I alluded to before, there were a lot of well, we've had a lot an online presence for a long time. How do you feel you've grown since then, and in what ways, right?
Oh boy, that's a long question.
Well, we got a long time. I've set aside 2 hours for y'all. We got to talk about something, right?
Well, I think one of the things is the older you get. I think that if you do it correctly, you're constantly changing and growing, and you take in new information. I don't think that's true for everyone. I think that some people get really static the older that they get. But for me, I think you keep adding new information and hopefully like ending up at better answers. I think for me personally, one way I've grown is just getting more and more over the trauma of my childhood, which makes me less reactive. Though I can certainly be reactive, but not being in that fight or flight mode all the time is certainly helpful. I think that one of the really big changes in me personally today versus the Gamergate era is I've seen like Jezebel just closed yesterday, who was a huge force in the Gamergate years. I love Jezebel. I love most of the writers at Jezebel. And I think like the financial collapse of that particular business model, part of it is due to mismanagement by the private equity firm that bought them out. But I also think part of it is we have the tactics of feminism that we've employed for the last 10, 15 years are clearly not resulting in a vibrant movement. It's not resulting in more real world rights. It's not resulting in a conversation about what women are facing. And I think for me personally, the biggest lesson I've taken is that internet screaming does not really equate to real world policies, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes sense to me, right? Like, we have to ask ourselves, like, is what we're doing moving us towards what we want, or is it moving us away, or is it just
Right.
making us tread water? I've seen a lot of posts, and this is kind of not a non sequitur, but a little bit of an aside of people who are swearing they're never going to vote for Joe Biden, right? They're like, "Oh, I will never vote for Genocide Joe." Is that what the
Right.
term they use for
Right.
it? Like, and then the question you ask is like, well, considering that you want policies that Genocide Joe will support and the other options will not, what do you think you're accomplishing here? Is this moving you closer to your political objectives, or is it moving you further away? And I think we all kind of have to ask that. But I
Isn't
want to
this well, hold on, because
oh,
this will piggyback into Dev. Dev, one of the reasons I enjoy your videos is I think, and before people online scream at me, I do think you come up with a lot of things that are structurally are wrong with the directions that progressives are going. That's not to say I agree with the conclusion she reached, but I think you've really put your finger on some of the things that are wrong with our movement today. And one of those are the purity spiral that you have an excellent video about, and the utopianism that we kind of fall into. So I would love to hear, like, from your point of view, how you feel about that.
Well, I mean, I'm not a progressive, right? I don't view
Right.
myself as a progressive, so
You're not.
um, no.
No.
Like
well, glad we got that settled. I
yeah,
was curious, right?
I view myself as like an Adam and Sitch style enlightened centrist. You know, I definitely do not like the right wing. There are some serious problems on the right. I grew up with the right wing trying to censor video games and wanting to repress gay people, and I didn't like any of that when I was younger. Um, and I think because the right wing was so ascendant in the 90s, at least culturally, it was easy to be a leftist. It was easy to be like like maybe not like a communist or anything, but it was easy to be like, why shouldn't we have healthcare? I mean, we have healthcare in Canada, but why shouldn't America have healthcare, right? Why shouldn't we have gay marriage? These were kind of easy. They're like slam dunks for people who are left leaning, right? Um, but the slam dunks are kind of drying up. And now you have tougher questions on the left, and the answers to those questions aren't exclusively leftist, because now you're getting into like more esoteric things like, should trans women compete in women's sports? That's not a slam dunk. It's a complicated question. There's a lot in
Yeah.
there. you know? So I think the reason that there has been a slow shift away from broader leftism is because it accomplished a lot. And it accomplished a lot of good. But we're kind of running out of the good. We haven't completely run out of it, but it's definitely starting to run out of good stuff.
Out of on that note, like, what would you say currently in 2023 today is what should progressives, in your opinion, be putting out there? What do you think is their strongest argument that they have today? Right? What should they
Right
be
now,
focusing on right now? Yes.
healthcare.
Yeah,
America needs healthcare.
Fair enough.
yeah.
That is the big one. Oh, and you talked about utopianism and purity spiraling, Brianna. I'll give you a concrete example. Okay, so you see a lot of rhetoric on the left. Let's say the very far left is, healthcare is a human right. Everything should be free. Everything should be available to everyone. Otherwise, you are oppressing people and you're letting people die. You're killing people, in fact. Um, in practical terms, what we've discovered, looking at like the UK's healthcare system and France's and Canada's healthcare system, what we've discovered is that if you make everything free, you have a shit ton of waste. And you only have so much resources to go around. There's only so many doctors, only so much time. So if you make everything free, you end up bankrupting your system. You can't it's fucked. However, if you add like a $20 copay to go to the doctors, you cut out like 90% of the waste. Because most people who are just showing up to like get a day off work and get a doctor's note, they're not going to do that because it's not free anymore, right? So these numbers are, I got them from Econoboy like a year ago. I can't pull them up right away, but I do remember them as being mostly accurate. Is that basically if you add a $20 copay, you cut out 90% of your healthcare waste. In terms of like people actually like healthcare waste from patients. So that's not ideologically pure if you're talking about healthcare as a human right. Like if that's your value, well, now it's not a human right. Now it costs $20, which means that if somebody doesn't have $20, if they're too poor and no one can lend them $20 and they can't get a job, well, that person is fucked. They're not going to get healthcare. But it also means that you get to have a healthcare service for everyone else, right? So there's certain instances where if you're ideologically pure, you actually end up with worse results than if you compromise. And I think healthcare is one of those.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I think that there's that trend across the board. Right, like we're seeing it right now, I think, really hyperbolically with the Israel-Hamas war and the rhetoric around that. If you have a stance that is, yeah, I did a 2-hour WIC panel the other night, and I said multiple times, like I stand with the people of Palestine. The human rights abuses towards civilians is unconscionable. I don't support it. Our top like foreign policy in this region should be to, stop the violence. But if you don't leap to the most extreme conclusion there, like a one-state solution and like implementing a democratic utopia there and taking away the borders, you are just, you don't have a voice in the conversation. So I agree with you on that. Dev, I do want to say, in like tonight, I hope we can just have a respectful back and forth about some of your content. I was studying a lot of your videos, which again, largely I enjoy. They're well produced, they're well thought out. I think that this is stuff the left needs an answer for. I've noticed though that there's a really big difference in how you define progressives and is I define progressives depending what the argument is you're trying to make. There was one I was watching, and you define progressives in this nice people that want health care, but as like Antifa and self-ID like trans people, they're non-binary and just want to make it up on the fly, right? So I think like one of the things I find sometimes difficult about your content is it sometimes feels like you have a conclusion that you want to reach, that both sides are equally bad, and you kind of reach for facts that fit that. And I don't always think it's an accurate way to view a situation.
Well, how do you define progressives then? What's your view of it?
I have a much more charitable point of view on this, right? Which is, I think at the highest level, progressivism is about wanting structural change for solutions. Like healthcare is a really good example. I grew up in Mississippi. So when I think about structural racism in the United States, I realize there's no policy around the edges that's going to make that society heal from the wounds still open today from the Civil War. So I think at the highest levels, like progressivism is about thinking about big structural policy changes. What you and I think, agree on is that there's a real tendency, especially online, to reformat to mean this extremely online kind of argument that tends towards a purity spiral, which is not helpful.
That's true, but it is, it's not just online, but I think
Mhm.
it comes out online because it's so easy, right? I think, Twitter is no longer 240 characters or whatever it was, but it was for a very long time, and I think that promoted a certain type of very short thinking, where you have to fit it into a very small box, and people did that for a decade, and now we have a bunch of short thinkers, if that makes sense. Especially if you're like a Twitter addict or you're a journalist or something. I think Twitter ruined a lot of people's brains, and I think that's part of it.
Yeah,
Um, but the bigger problem, I think, I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to do a bit of philosophizing, unfortunately, Wick.
go ahead,
Which
please.
I did with the Karl Marx debate as well, just to explain a few things. So there was a leftist philosopher named Herbert Marcuse, and he came up with this idea, and he it's not called the March of Progress, but we'll just use March of Progress as a shorthand. And the idea basically is that if you have, and he thought this was a good thing, he was promoting this. I don't think it's a good thing. If you have a movement that is based on change, and then you kind of universalize that movement so that it simply pursues change, it inevitably radicalizes and drives off a cliff. It has to, because it's not aiming at a goal, it's aiming at change itself. So like, if you say I want to
Right.
change to do XYZ, that's one thing. But if you're saying I want to change for change's sake, then that's where the utopianism comes from, and the purity spiraling. And he outlined this all in a book called Repressive Tolerance, where the idea is that tolerance, in his view, had to repress people who weren't tolerant.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
this is where I think I would like one of the reasons the way like my views on what women are facing in America have not changed since Gamergate. What has changed radically is the way I go about trying to like affect that change, right? Because I agree with you. Like at some point, we turned a corner in how we are talking about what women face in American society. And we stopped talking about policies and we started talking more about an aesthetic where if you had the right like points of view and you expanded feminism to mean, body shaming and, this very wide gamut of related struggles where you had to kind of identify with all of these values and then eventually hopefully you could talk about the policy. I think this is where feminism really fucked up, frankly, in the Gamergate era. If I could do anything and go relive those years over again, I would have gotten off of Twitter and I would have used the political capital I had in that moment to push Microsoft, push Activision to like change their internal hiring processes, right? And I think that we've really gotten to a point where feminism as a force is not going to be effective until we take a step back and go, hold on, what are the issues we need to be thinking about? Childcare is completely unaffordable. Women have been run out of the workforce post COVID. We're not really seeing an investment in that. Until we look at these kind of bigger structural issues, I don't see us like becoming a relevant force in politics again.
One thing that I noticed in your answers here from both of you, right?
Mhm.
When Dev asked you what is progressivism, who is progressive, etc. And then also from Dev's philosophizing there, I think I've kind of had a bit of a eureka moment, and bear with me, right?
Please.
In my mind, woo, right? Progressivism, from your definition, what you gave to me, is progress towards a goal, right? But
It should be. It is
yes,
not. But
but what
yes.
but what a lot of progressives, and what I've seen this argument online before, right, is that we are going to progress for progress's sake. Like we are going to move forward. right? Regardless of where that is, we are going to move forward. We have to move past capitalism. We have to move past these things. We have to move forward, right? And I think that sometimes, at least in the SFO videos I've seen, that is the what progressives are painted as, and I don't think that's a fair characterization, Dev. Right? I think that, like, yes, there's some of that, and I think that's mostly online stuff. But I do think that plenty of progressives, plenty of people who do identify as progressives, are towards specific goals. Does that make sense? Am I off my rocker here?
That does make sense, but I'm not sure it's entirely accurate. I mean, there's some accuracy there, I think. But considering how much blowback you've been receiving recently, Brianna, you have to know that there's definitely not just a small radical online fringe, but a significant number of people who now believe this way.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we've talked about this privately in DMs. I don't mind sharing it here. But, I personally believe that the left is just 10 years behind the right as far as being radicalized on the internet, right? I think a lot of the same tendencies we see in the Tea Party have now come to our own doorstep. I think this version of the Democratic Party, unfortunately, would be very susceptible to, a left-wing Donald Trump if a figure like that came along. So I agree with you. I think there's time to stop it. And, Wick, one of the reasons I consider you a good friend at this point is I think I have a different. I think the degree to which I think women are not getting a fair shake in society is a little different than yours. I think we have a different appraisal there, but directionally, I think we both see this torrent of crazy on both sides, and we're taking a step and saying this needs to be about policy. We've got to calm this down, and we've got to learn to talk to each other so we can have a functioning democracy. I very much agree with you about that. So does that make sense to you, Dev?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
To go back to what you were saying earlier, you mentioned that basically progressives have been making less progress as the radicalizations happened, right?
Yeah.
You probably don't agree with my characterization of this, but I'm going to give it anyway.
Please.
I think that there was a lot of things that needed to be fixed, and the feminists fixed a lot of them. Not all of them, but they fixed a lot of them over, let's say, the past 100 years or so. There's been a lot of improvement. And then as the number of things to fix began to dry up, you started to see them focus on small things, right? Microaggressions, body shaming, like you mentioned, things that weren't nearly as important as should women be allowed to hold jobs and vote, much smaller things. And then as they focused on the smaller things, they radicalized. They became a lot more crazy looking to the normies. And then while they were in that echo chamber, they started taking big L's, like with Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
And like the rollback of LGBT acceptance. So I think there's been this ebb and flow where as the left, the broader left, has been accomplishing goals, they've run out of goals to accomplish, and which has radicalized them. And then they became crazy. Then they started rolling back. They started losing all those goals they had accomplished.
So I understand that these things happen at the same time, Deb. But my question to you would be, like, and I want you to be clear here, are you blaming that that niche kind of focus that the left has had on the microaggressions and the small things as to why they lost Roe v. Wade, and as to why they've taken big L's when it comes to LGBTQ processes, protections and stuff? Are you implying that there is a causation factor there?
I think there partially is, yes. I mean, obviously, another part of it is that they have political opponents who want to roll those things back, and they took that opportunity, right? But they made themselves weak. They gave them the opening, you know?
I hear what you're saying, and I'm not going to deny there's a lot of that that's going on. I definitely think so. I think, and you talked about this in your video about the purity spiral, right? Which is excellent. I hope we can leave that in the show notes and people will check it out. I think if you're on the left,
Thanks very much.
Dev has a very good analysis of a real problem that we have. But even in your own video, you talk about how this is advantageous for us to build a coalition, but in the end, is kind of a cancer that eats us apart, right? So I think that's exactly what happened, right? This started with us kind of all getting together and going, hey, we've all noticed that our sexual assault claims are being kind of systematically not being taken seriously. I think women across a wide variety of fields look around at the workplace and go, you know what? I have a lot of trouble being taken seriously and being heard on my own teams, right? Or as soon as I have a child, I've noticed that my job is very eager to show me a door. Right. This is a set of problems that we've certainly not solved and we're nowhere near solving. What I think has happened is I think online is a trap, particularly for people. I want to be really clear. I fell into this trap. I look back at my own congressional run, and I think if I understood the things I do today, I think I would have had a much better shot of winning. Because what I can look back and see really clearly was online was pushing me to take this leftmost view on literally everything. Sex work, not accepting money from XYZ, and really focusing on the superficial, when what I needed to be doing was spending a lot more time in my district and talking about the policies like directly affecting their lives. And that's something I would do very differently today. Online, I think, is a trap, because I think it gives people this feeling that they're making a change, and I think it's with the best of intention. Yeah, I'm not like a fat person, but I can really imagine that, like, feeling degraded all the time or feeling the ways that like society doesn't respect you. I would imagine there's some anger and some trauma there. And I think it probably feels good to talk about that online. The problem is somewhere along the line, like the problem is with online culture, there's no point where we pause and say, okay, we need to make it so, people that are larger can access trains and planes with a little bit more dignity, right? There's not a public policy component that we're pushing for. As much as the fringe left loves to shit on liberals, I do think this is something structurally liberals are better at than progressives, kind of forming coalitions and trying to get specific policies passed.
Well, insofar as the fat thing is concerned, as a fat guy, like I'm quite
How
fat.
dare you speak over one of the oppressed classes, Brianna? We have a fat
I
man with us
apologize.
today. Okay.
I will say that, like, being fat's just unhealthy. And
Sure.
I think rather than, like, it is better to promote public health than it is to promote, accommodating people being fat, I think. We want people to lose weight, not feel comfortable being fat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also, yeah, this is something I saw like when I was running for office. I do think that there are situations where I don't think it would kill airlines to have a few larger seats that are given for priority for people that physically can't fit in those seats. That doesn't seem crazy to me, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
that makes sense.
maybe the fat thing is a bad example. There are any number of like reasonable public policy things we could be focused on, and we just don't, because the conversation is so much about like online purity. Here's a really good example: the trans debate. If you put me in charge tomorrow of like talking about the trans public policy issue, I would try to find something very similar to gay marriage, where like you're focused on a single public policy position with a broad possible range of support. And I would make that like the rights of trans children to attend public school. But instead, it gets into like this more esoteric thing and this more esoteric thing, which often I agree with, but I also understand how it's not ever going to be a popular public policy position. And I think all of this is a trap. I think if we're serious about things like healthcare and trans dignity and women's rights, we've got to come up with a new strategy, because any honest look at where the progressive movement is today, you have to admit we have less cultural power today than we did a decade ago.
To you, Brianna, right?
Yeah.
You say this, but the implications are weird of that. If the online is a trap, does that not at least imply or infer that we should simply cede the field, leave online to do online things, right? and just leave it alone. I think you and I could both agree, and I think SFO
Yeah.
might back us up, that the online and how that plays out does have real world implications. It does impact not only policy, right, but people's individuals' lives as well. Like there are countless examples that we can point to of people being harassed, stalked, etc., and also of policies that have been either implemented because of discourse that has started online, or prevented from going through, and or swift boated because of that's an old term, because of online discourse, right? And so
2004.
yeah, like if online's a trap, it's not a trap we can avoid, is it?
I've talked so much, Dev. Go ahead.
I I don't know how to answer that actually, because I had a brainwave about a previous thing you were saying, Brianna, and that was occupying my head. I'm sorry, Wick.
No, it's okay. Do your brainwave thing. We can
I'll
ignore
answer
Wick.
it
Wick
soon.
can just play his video games and make money off of
No,
you. That's
no,
okay.
no. I will say, Wick. I will say that um, I don't think you can ignore the online space, because you have people who are more left leaning complaining about harassment all the time, and there's some faked harassment, but there's a lot of real harassment. But then you also have people on the right who complain about getting canceled. And that definitely happens too. People have lost their jobs, they've been debanked, they've had their
Oh,
social media shut
I'm
down,
going to make a
their YouTube
prediction
channels.
for you. There's going to be a left-wing resurgence in believing in cancel culture after a month or two, right? Like I think in the next couple
After all
months
these,
we're
I'm
gonna hear
there.
a hue and
I'm there.
cry of people decrying people losing their jobs for their political opinions. I am guaranteeing that. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, for example, Kraut, if you know Kraut and T, he recently said that in Germany, a whole bunch of migrants who had showed up from the Middle East, and now they're saying stuff about Israel, they're getting deported, because Germany is very strict with its Jewish laws for obvious reasons, right? So there's a whole bunch of people who are just getting kicked out of Germany now. And so I do think there's going to be some sort of a backlash with people who are going very mask off on the Israel-Palestine situation and losing their jobs. And suddenly it'll be like, you can't cancel people over your political beliefs. And it's like, well, listen, that's been happening for years now to people who are right leaning. So I don't want anyone canceled, either side, right? But if these are the rules of the game, this is how it has to be, you know?
I mean, I don't have an issue with someone losing. I don't think I have the same position over what y'all do. I mean, Dev, you have a video where you talk about the woman with the wig pulling, right? And
Yeah.
how you didn't support I think the name of the video is what is it? Cancel culture is totalitarian or something like that. And you're talking about this woman that basically this drunk white guy sees her on the street, tries to pull her wig off in a really violent way, clearly hurts her, and she happens to film it, and the guy ends up fired. You're talking how you don't support that. I actually don't really have a problem with that necessarily. What I do have a problem with is, and this is where I expect I'm going to get yelled at after this show, is I have been against a certain set of tactics from the Gamergate era, right? I think it is wrong to dox people. I think it's wrong to go through everything they've ever said publicly or privately and then try to use that to destroy their reputation. I think death threats, rape threats, all that stuff should just be off the table, right? And I want to be really honest and say that a decade ago, I think Gamergate was doing that, and I would imagine all three of us would probably agree today. The people I personally see doing this the most are my own side. And it just seems so crazy hypocritical of me that we decried all these tactics and now we've just embraced them as our core strategy. Does that kind of make sense?
Yep. That's fuck, what was his name? Was it Saul Alinsky? I don't know. The guy who wrote Rules for Radicals. And he wrote this book basically outlining what radical movements should do to take power. And one of the rules is just be as hypocritical as possible.
Yeah.
Like do the underhanded stuff and also accuse your opponents of doing it, you know?
Right.
So this is kind of how radical movements go as they radicalize.
But I mean, you can't. This is where I'm really torn a lot of the time because I do agree with the stated political goals of the progressive movement, right? Yeah, I do want more acceptance for trans people. I do want things to be better for women. I do, I've been on a WIC panel before talking about my belief in like structural reparations for, Black people. I think it's the only way we can move forward from the pain of the Civil War. So when it comes to a lot of these policies, I'm right there on board. Where I'm feeling increasingly homeless is there is a standard I try to hold myself to professionally in how I behave. And I just see a lot of my own side engaged in tactics that just, I don't know how to say it other than they feel evil to me.
To both of you, and this is a
Yeah.
very good question because I think we've both acknowledged, or all of us have acknowledged, that it's worse now, right, than it was
Yeah.
10 years ago. It's worse now than it was 10, 15 years ago. Again, I'm a little older myself, right? And I was active online in the early 2000s and things like that. Very different environment, for better and worse, right? There's some things I don't want back from those days. However,
You don't want the Xbox Live chats back?
look, we had some fun times, but those times are behind us.
Yeah.
We have grown up and grown out of those things. But I will ask,
Halfway?
do
Halfway?
well, should we, and how do we do so? And that's my question. Is because it's very easy to get black pilled on this, like these doxing tactics, these just doubling down tactics, this constant harassment. It's been shown to work, right? It's been shown to be effective in getting the people you don't want to be around not be around anymore. It hasn't worked when it comes to combating ideas, getting policies passed, any of that, but it's worked for what I think people really like, and that's hurting others.
Yeah.
So how do we get passes? Can we get passes? Is there a way to stop this spiral, as I guess you'd call it, or this constant wave of tit for tat, of reciprocal radicalization, of if you use those tactics, we're going to use those tactics 10 times as hard, et cetera, et cetera. What do we think? I want Dev to go first on this one, and then
Yeah,
I'll
please.
let you go.
Oh man, how do you fix the problem? That's a very
If we're going to talk
big
about the
load
problem,
you've
we
heaped
got
on
to
my
talk about how to
shoulders.
fix it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you have to. It's a tall order. Not everyone's gonna be able to do it. You have to be able to understand your opponent's arguments. All right. You have to understand that, like, when a conservative, expresses some sort of anti-trans opinion, he doesn't actually want to kill all trans people and have the streets run red with the blood of trans people and outlaw. No, he's generally scared for his kids, right? And now you can think that it's wrong for him to be scared for his kids in that way, and there's some good evidence that he probably is wrong, but it's not coming from a place of evil, right? And there's obviously inverted situations as well, where like right wingers do not understand leftist point of views, leftists don't understand right wing point of views. Um, Basically, if you can't steel man your opponent's arguments, you're not going to be able to sympathize with them when they have an emotional reaction to something that they think is bad.
So being able to steal man, or wanting to steal, but the problem
Yeah,
is, Dev,
yeah,
no
you
one
have to
wants
like.
to do that.
I can't make them. I mean, there's this idea, like pre-internet, you watch what was on TV. Maybe you could like rent a movie, but like you watch what was on TV. I would have never grown to love martial arts films if I didn't watch them at 3 a.m. by like sneaking downstairs as a kid, right? It was the only thing on. Um, and I think from 16 to 18, I had insomnia, so I couldn't sleep, and I was just staying up all night watching these martial arts films because that's all I could do, right? Um, it's one of those things where, as technological advancement has increased and we have more access to Netflix, for example, we never have to be exposed to anything we don't like ever again, which is nice because we don't want to interact with things that we hate. But also, it means that we never actually discover anything new. So if you take that principle, you apply it to political echo chambers. People don't watch videos or read books or entertain ideas from other political camps because they don't have to anymore. If you're a
Yeah.
leftist, you can go on YouTube and watch an infinite amount of leftist content and never be exposed to a right-wing idea. And same the other way around, right? There's it sounds very strange, but there's too much access, and the the white pillar in me wants to say that, well, no, people can be trusted to diversify their media
Mhm.
intake and understand what
Well,
other people think, and there are some people who have for sure, but it seems like most people just aren't doing it.
It's
I think that's
oh, go
fair.
on,
I think that's
go
fair.
ahead, Will.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I know that, and I've told you this in DMs, I am better at my job because I watch your videos. And I do think because you have such a salient, brutal, fair critique of the left, I think it makes me stronger to watch that critique and figure out what the answer is, right? So I agree with you that this tendency for all of us to never listen to something on the other side, it makes us weak. It makes us unable to function. And one of the reasons I really respect Destiny a lot is, I think, more than anyone else out there. Yeah, look, let's be clear. He makes a lot of sweaty gamer comments. He can certainly tend towards being hyperbolic. But I also think one of the good things he does is he teaches people how to think. I think when people make claims, he really encourages his audience to look through that, to think through it before responding, and to really, really do your research before having really strong opinions. I think that's a really good example. One of the things I think has really, really changed over my lifetime is this democratization of information. I'm just barely old enough to remember when you could get your news and it had to be on either cable or the printed newspaper that came to your house every single day. And that had a lot of downsides. You know, you didn't hear about a lot of stories about gay people in that time period. You know, the makeup of the newsrooms had huge implications for how things were covered, which is why I think we can look at public policy and the conversations we were not having about issues like structural racism back in the 90s and see how simple they were compared to today. That is a bad thing. But something was really good about that I think is really, really under acknowledged today is in the newspaper and cable news era of public information, that did go through someone at the top that was mature, that was thoughtful, that generally took some time to make sure the stuff there was mostly accurate and did represent both sides. Today, we have no incentives for any of that. And I think we're much weaker as a society. I think a direct reason we're seeing such a stupid analysis on foreign policy issues today is we have now two generations of Americans. They've never heard any position other than America is bad and our foreign policy is always wrong. And the world is a little bit more complicated than that, even though we've made plenty of foreign policy mistakes. So I think that a really important thing is for America to take more of a role in thinking about how this information landscape is influencing us, right? We've got to protect free speech, we've got to protect open expression, but I also think we've lost control of the way people get their information to a mob, and I don't think it's serving our country well.
Yeah, so you're getting at like the post-truth era.
Yeah,
If you know, like the
I do.
postmodern post-truth era, yeah. So it's like, well, can you trust CNN? Well, I mean, maybe, they're a decently big institution. There's a lot of moving parts, lots of people there, but like,
Yeah.
what if they're all compromised, right? Well, can you trust Fox? Well, maybe not. Like, these are big corporations, and if you don't trust corporations because they're corporate, maybe you want to go somewhere else. Do you trust Tim Pool, or do you trust like some smaller site? Do you trust some really fringe one like Zero Hedge or something? Because there's utility in looking at the small guys too, because they don't have
Yeah.
corporate interests, but now they have like personal interests, and they're probably more radical than the mainstream guys. So, like, anything can be tainted with some form of bias, any company, any individual, any institution. So who do you trust? And then you get to a point where it's like, well, do you trust anything at all? Like, I've I've never been to Antarctica, so how do I know that it actually exists, right? Like, it could be an entire, like, a huge psyop the entire world's playing on me. You can go down a rabbit hole
You
of like,
joke
what
about
do you
this, but there are
trust?
some people, there's a growing, well, it's not growing that fast, but there is a portion of people who do just don't trust anything. Any institution is suspect, any fact is suspect. Look at the denialism that has come out after October 7th of the
Yeah.
things that everyone saw on video,
Yeah.
and suddenly there's people with millions of followers with hundreds of thousands of likes on their shit just making shit up and saying it, and it gets more likes than the truth, right? And
Yeah.
how do you fix that? Because Brianna Wu, like, respectfully, like,
Mhm.
there were a lot of problems back when we had so much gatekeeping, right? Like,
100%.
it held us back so much, and I don't know if we want or can go back to that style of having some kind of person on the top, some elite deciding what we can and can't, like, what I don't want that, right?
100, and that's not why I'm advocating. I'm
Okay,
saying
but
this
that's
was
what
a
it sounds like.
downside
Yeah.
that I'm saying that every system has upsides and downsides, right? A really big upside of that system is there was an editor involved, and I think the fact that editor is no longer involved today is a real downside for how we are getting information. So, like, I think the fact that all of these algorithms exist to addict you, like they literally keep psychologists on staff to figure out how to addict you. I don't have an immediate answer for this, but I wonder if there's a role for us to take a more active, um, regulatory position in asking how is so much social media affecting people's brains, right? When the Facebook whistleblower came out, she was giving all kinds of instances from Facebook's own internal studies about what Instagram is doing to an entire generation of young women's brains, and it's terrible. It's upping their suicidality. It's destroying their body image. It's leading to mental health issues. I mean, it's just across the board. It's really, really bad, and I'm not going to tell you I have easy answers for this right now because all of these problems are multifactorial. But I do think the fact that we've just basically seeded all of this and we've said we're not going to take any role in this whatsoever, I do think that's adding to the instability that is really putting democracy at risk.
Yeah. You see, there's another. I mostly agree with you, but there's a different way to kind of phrase it, right?
Mhm.
The downside of democratization is that people are generally retarded, right? And that's just how it is, right? You know, man, I remember during the height of, let's say, COVID paranoia. Not to imply that COVID wasn't real or anything. I'm not going down that rabbit hole,
Okay, I
okay?
was about to say, come on, man. I'm trying to keep my
No, I'm not
channel
going down that rabbit
monetized.
hole.
Like,
No, no, no. But like there were people. I remember one person specifically said, "You need to respect democracy and trust the experts." And I'm like, hold on, those are two completely opposing values. Because an expert opinion is specifically non-democratic. It's the opinion of a learned minority that is informing the unlearned majority, right? So when you have democratization, you do hear from more voices, and that can be a good thing. But also, like specialization is like I don't know what the word is. There's something that is anti-democratic but also necessary in society in order to actually try to ascertain what the truth is. The only issue is, like, how can you trust that, right? We are in a quagmire. Like, I have no solutions to this problem. I just know that at least on a local scale, like within your own personal life, if you do your best to tell the truth, you can make things at least somewhat better for you and better for people around you. You know, if you have a platform, better for those who listen in on your platform.
if you're allowed to be honest, yes. But I think one of the bigger problems with these platforms are people are not allowed to be honest. Can we talk about for a moment, right? I know this is maybe off topic, but this is bothering me. Ethan Klein and Hamas Pike.
Oh,
I guess not. Give me a second. Hopefully
Brianna
she
Wu ran
comes back
away.
soon. I didn't kick her out, gang.
Wonder if she
I hope her internet's okay. Um, we'll give it a second. In the meantime, gang, if you're enjoying this content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Feel free to follow me on Twitch or Kick if you're watching me through those things. Hit those hit the sub button. Throw bits at me. Give me subs. Throw super chats. I'll read one super chat now from Testicle Johnson for $5. I think all chicks in video games should have thin waists and massive tits, and all the dudes should have 5% body fat. Everyone should feel bad. $10 from Zephyr Hash to say, at Dev, I get what you were saying, but how long are we supposed to wait? And how much energy are we supposed to put into making sure everyone understands our point of view, specifically when time is of the essence? And also, welcome back, Brianna.
Hi, my computer is restarting, so I'm on my phone. So sorry.
No, it's okay. Do your thing. Let's
It's like
get
a
that
scheduled
started.
Windows update that got you.
I have no idea.
Well, I'm just glad you're back, and we were wondering if finally the leftist mob had come for you, right? Like that this was your time, and we were going to be like hearing news reports or something of suddenly Sunday found your location and his mob descended upon you. I don't know, right? But
Yeah, Wick, I've heard that you've had a beef with President Sunday recently.
yes,
What's that all about?
um, he made some he keeps making shit up and going after people. He told aristocracy that she needed to calm down after October 7th and made some
Oh,
Yeah,
very
brutal.
untoward comments. I called him out on that, and here we are.
Yeah,
I
there are some people like I will talk with pretty much anyone. You know, I'll talk
mhm.
with very far left people. I'll talk with very far right people. The people I won't talk with are the people who actually take it offline, right? So I'll never speak. Okay, I'll never speak to President Sunday. I'll never speak to Ethan Ralph. I'll never speak to Nick Fuentes. People who actually try to like get your stuff fucked up. I will never talk to those people because that's too far for me.
Well, I had a gentleman. This wasn't Sunday, to be clear. It was someone else. I know who it was. Recently, basically told me he's going to try to get my channel taken away. He got me a
my
warning
God.
on
Oh, really?
Twitch the other day because I unfortunately forgot that one of my guests was banned from Twitch, and but they remembered, and so I
Mm.
took a ding from that. But yeah, there are
Uh,
people who will just sit on my shit, wait for me to break toss, and it is what it is, right?
Yep. Same here.
I mean, I think this is really a very serious problem where one of the things I have really found recently is I've really enjoyed spending more time reaching out and talking to people in the right wing, right? Like I debated John Doyle at the University of South Carolina just a couple of days ago. I did Tim Pool's show. Dev, I can only speak for myself, but I'm really enjoying speaking with you tonight, despite, our history of Gamergate. And I don't know
We gotta talk about
when
Gamergate eventually. The
we
chat is
will at
getting
some
angry.
point.
We
We
The
will
will.
chat's getting
we'll
angry.
get to that. But
But
before we do,
but
I'm gonna
hold on,
we'll
hold on.
finish. We'll
Let me
finish,
just
but
finish
before we
my
do, yeah.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
What I was going to say is I don't know when we got so afraid to actually talk about ideas, right? It really feels like the left, our top answer for stuff nowadays is to just refuse to engage with anything that's unpleasant, right? And it's not. I understand that often there's some ideas that just are not worth responding to. Like I think we would want to take the like a policy proposal of a Holocaust in the United States seriously or give that airtime. But for a lot of the stuff we talk about, I think it's so counterproductive the way we won't engage it on its merits. Just before the show, I was watching Ethan and Hassan debate, and Ethan really having some very salient points about why a one state solution would not work for Israel, right? And Hassan would not engage with that in any honest way.
That's that sticks on the point that I wanted to bring up before you had your computer
Sure.
issues. First of all, your camera isn't up, so if I don't know if the computer's
Oh,
back or not. No,
apologize.
it's fine.
Yeah,
I just didn't know, Um, let's talk about Ethan and Hassan, right? Because Dev made the point that we need to improve our areas of the internet by being honest ourselves. So that, and so my question on this, my tack on this is, I don't know if we are going to be allowed to do that, right? And I think the way that Ethan Klein has been treated over his, what is this, the third, fourth discussion he's had with Hassan over all this, right? To see the vitriol my timeline has put on Ethan for simply being upset that a bunch of people like for having pretty normie takes, right? You can say they're wrong or whatever, but he's just being honest. Like you can't say that this guy's lying about this. He's being honest. And to see the way that he is just being excoriated, that he is losing respect, viewership, etc., to be being raked over the coals. He was forced to apologize, right, to someone who had offended him. Like it's wild to me, and I don't see it getting better. I think this is kind of, at least for the foreseeable future, the new norm. You are not allowed to be honest because if you are, that platform or that space you have will be taken from you. What do you think?
Well, kinda. Like Sargon's still around, right? He's certainly not on the left. He's significantly further to the right than me. He thinks I'm a communist, for example, which I'm not, obviously. But he's but we're still good friends, though. Even though we have political differences, we're still pals. Um, but he still has he exists outside of the leftist internet bubble, and he still exists. He opened his think tank, and he has like a dozen employees, and he's doing his thing. So there's definitely ways for you to exist outside of like internet leftism. I think you can still speak the truth if you're not in that bubble. It's hard for people who are, though. 'Cause, I've seen a lot of people who are, they're like center left, like someone like Stardust, right? Get into lots of trouble with some people for speaking out against the far left. Um, hmm. I I have a very black pilled opinion on this.
Oh
I hope
no.
I hope maybe I can be white pilled on it one day. But I think there's this view. I think there's this view on the left that because so much of academia is leftist, that the right just has no worthwhile ideas to consider, which isn't true.
No.
There's some decent right wing literature out there for sure that's
But
worth reading just
I'm
to
going to put a
understand.
pin in that because I want to ask
Oh,
Woo. Woo, what's the best right wing opinion out there right now?
Well, so one of the things I was very, very young. I had to get over my, religious right, Mississippi indoctrination, and I look back on that actually and see it as my superpower. There are a lot of things that I took from that I think are very advantageous in my professional career. I think that the right has some ideas about personal responsibility that are just true. They are like a responsibility to solve your own problems. I'll give you a really concrete example. When it comes to drug addiction, one of the things, like I just celebrated 20 years, this is sobriety, right? Yeah, I've noticed when you talk to left wing friends, their top thing they suggest on this is not judging. Let's get AA out of the mix because they're a non secular organization. All of this, and I can tell you, the thing that is most helpful for getting over a drug addiction is accountability, structure, standards, and frankly, really harsh consequences when you fail. This is the reason drug courts are so effective, right? So I think that the right does have some really common sense ideas that make a lot of sense about how to get to where you want to go in life.
Sorry for the interruption, Dev. I wanted to see what Woo would have to say on that, but carry on, please. Right wing
okay.
ideas,
So
the
yeah, yeah.
portion of the
So
left
so
think, okay, you know where you're at.
you just mentioned something about getting away from AA, right?
Yeah,
Okay, right. And earlier you mentioned refusing to engage with unpleasantness.
yeah.
Something. Yeah. Okay. So there's something I've been thinking about, and I had a conversation with Sitch like 6 months ago that kind of sparked this idea in me, and I've really been going over. Um, Wick, I know that you know about height, moral foundations. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Brianna, do you know about
I
moral foundation
don't. I
theory?
apologize.
Okay, it's a psychology thing. Jonathan Haidt did research into the psychology of morality, and he basically pointed out that there's 6 dimensions across which humans judge things to be moral or immoral. And I'll just pull them up here real quick. Okay, it's care and harm, fairness and cheating, loyalty and betrayal, authority and subversion, sanctity and degradation, liberty and oppression. And what he found with his research is that you have certain political views map onto certain moral foundations, which are more or less important to the individual, and also certain personality types. So when you have what he found is that when you talk to someone who's very very progressive, they tend basically only to care about care and harm, right?
Hmm.
So maximizing care, avoiding harm,
Can you
and
name the other four really quickly so I can
um,
contrast that in my mind?
it's care, harm, fairness, cheating, loyalty, betrayal, authority, subversion, sanctity, degradation, liberty, oppression. And those are the 6.
Would
Um,
I mean, we can see the liberty oppression, right? The oppressor. What's the difference between liberty oppression and oppressor oppressed dynamics? Because the left is famous for oppressor oppressed dynamics and caring about
Well,
that.
in his research, he found that socialists do tend to value liberty and oppression. Progressives value it less than socialists.
Okay.
Yeah, but also fascists value authority overwhelmingly, other than the other five. You find that conservatives tend to value loyalty more.
Yeah.
Religious people tend to value sanctity more, and progressives tend to value care and harm more. Liberals, just like normie, like centrist liberals, tend to value fairness more, right? So you have these different views of morality that map onto different views of politics, and I've seen so many very progressive people talk about like harm reduction. Harm reduction is a great example. Harm reduction is like the let's not be so harsh on people who have drug addictions. We'll give them like safe supplies of heroin, as if you could ever have such a thing.
Which is
We'll
a
give
good
them,
no, needle programs do work. We have a lot of data about that.
yeah, but like you also don't want to enable someone's addiction. You don't
Right.
want to you do want to them to not be addicts first and foremost, right?
Sure. But I mean, being out on the street, like, using dirty needles and getting all kinds of terrible diseases, it costs the public a ton of money. It's not doing them any favors, and it's an opportunity to talk about getting them into treatment, right?
That's true. That's all true.
Yeah.
However, if you have a different moral way of looking at it, you might ask the question, well, I don't want to be the person who gives a druggie some drugs.
Sure.
That
Oh,
that would not be good for me.
obviously. Yeah.
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 So
I agree with you. Yes.
yeah, so like there's different ways to view it, right? But with harm reduction does come the sense of, if we just reduce as much harm as possible, because things are so terrible, just we have to reduce harm, reduce harm. We can't worry about anything else, just reduce the harm. It's like, well, you're not building anything virtuous there. It's like, yeah, okay, you're reducing harm, but you're just like lessening the negative. You're not making anything positive, if that makes sense. So there's because you mentioned AA, and AA
Yeah.
has a religious component. If you believe that religion is negative, a net negative for society, then you might have the opinion of, well, I'm just going to say fuck AA because it has these other negative things that come along with it, because I want the perfect answer, and
Right.
AA isn't it,
Is this
But
reflected, just real quick, in like the people who are critical of Mr. Beast, who built 100 wells or cured blindness in 1,000 people, and say, well,
that's part of it. Yeah,
because
that's
you
part of
haven't fixed the structural issues, you've just enabled those structural
it.
issues to keep going, and your charity is actually causing long-term harm. So yeah, is that kind of
That's like that's part of it. There's also another aspect to that, though, that comes out of Engels' writing. Engels is a socialist, and Marx and Engels. Engels wrote about how basically charity is evil because it is given at the discretion of the capitalist, of the rich person, so he can make himself feel good by giving money to solve problems that he caused. And it's like, well, that's
Yeah.
just ridiculous. It's like, well, I don't even agree with that point of view, but even if that were the truth, it's still good to give them money, right? Like charity still has its place. But it was his view that, like, well, no, the working class deserves the money. So if a rich person gives it to them, they're doing the bare minimum, and you can't give them any sort of positive feedback for that. And it's like, well, that seems almost sociopathic to me.
Can I circle around about something you were talking about? Because AA is a really good example, I think, about this
Okay.
feeling of utopianism on the left, and how this is so poorly, I think it results in really bad public policy. So from my perspective, my home state of Mississippi has no resources almost for drug addiction, right? I was very fortunate to have a family that could afford to send me to $30,000 live at the rehab like therapy for 2 months, like, and pay that out of pocket. My God, was I lucky about that. But most people don't, right? It's not going to surprise you. Mississippi does not have free for everyone drug and alcohol treatment programs on the corner. They do have a lot of churches that will lend space for people. So AA has a principle where you don't have to make God your higher power. You can make AA your higher power. You can make spiritualism your higher power. Doesn't matter what you want to make it. There are secular ways to do that. And they are literally, I see my own side talking about AA as if this utopian, let's make everything secular, that itself is the goal. The goal is not give people that are addicted to drugs and alcohol a path to treatment and sobriety. The goal is to be morally pure. And it's just so counterproductive. I know more people that got sober from AA than I do from rehab. Matthew Perry, in his book before he died, has wonderful things to say about AA. And this is just this tendency of having to have a perfect solution that I don't think is resulting in good public policy.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that comes from Haidt's moral foundations, right? So,
Mm.
I mean, it's on Wikipedia. It's a pretty well known idea if you want to look at it in depth. But basically, like when you have two different people with two different moral foundations, one of them cares about care harm, the other one cares about loyalty betrayal. So that would be like a progressive and a conservative. You put those two together, they're going to view each other as immoral. And not because one of them is necessarily right and one of them is necessarily wrong, but because they have different psychology, right? So the progressive might say, hey, you're hurting people with your behavior. You should stop that because we should be maximizing for care. And the conservative might say, you're betraying somebody and we should stop that. We should be maximizing for loyalty, right? So they're going to have different, they almost like, it's almost like they speak a different moral language when they're
Oh,
interacting
we
with each other.
do. I don't know if you've ever read this book. What is the name of it? It's talking about the psychology of Republicans and why they kind of tend towards authoritarianism in ways that the left doesn't. But there's a like something I think that's really underappreciated on the left is how the foundation of how conservatives think really starts with this idea of a father figure in the home whose job it is to protect the family from harm in a lot of terrible ways, right? And that's making decisions, listening, providing. Like that's just kind of the moral foundation of how a lot of conservatives think. And I see so many people on my own side sneering at that, but I think they're really out of touch with how a large part of the country just views itself and what those relationships are like.
I don't know if that's true. And let's if I may, if you'll
I'll give you
indulge
the
me.
title of the book if you'll give me a minute. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
take
was
your
a
time to get the
bestseller.
title of the book, but
The
the idea
Republican
that the
brain.
right is just tends towards more authoritarianism than the left. I don't know. I don't. It might be true, but I have seen a lot of authoritarian lefties in my day. Maybe it's a selection
There it is.
bias, but I've
Right
seen
here.
a
This is
lot.
an excellent book. I highly
Okay,
recommend
what's it
reading it.
called
The
again? Just
Republican Brain by Chris Mooney.
okay.
And
Republican brain. The-
look, I think it's very clear, like in recent events, that the left is not pure of this
Sure,
completely,
sure.
right? But there is just more of a tendency.
It
Fair
depends.
enough.
So there's like two different types of authoritarianism, right? So there's like the autocratic authoritarian. So
Mm-hmm.
the strong man, the person who consolidates power into himself. So that would be like the fascist leader or the monarch. The singular strong entity. But then on the left, you have like democratic tyranny, where it's mob rule, and it's just simply by what the majority wants, which can also be very destructive. So it's two different types of authoritarianism, I think.
Yeah.
Even then, though, right? There are portions of the left, I guess the more authoritarian portions, that are democratic to an extent, but then they say something should never be voted on, and it happens to be their most important
Yeah,
values that
of
they
course,
think,
right?
right? Like they,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to look into it more. I'm
I
beyond the
well,
scope.
I think that's just a practical necessity of
Fair,
obtaining and wielding
maybe.
power. That's just kind of how it
Maybe.
has to be.
Speaking of practical necessities and retaining and wielding power and things like that, what do we think? If I may get your guys' temperature, I see you, chat. I see you, chat. I know you want to talk about the Gamergate thing. I will ask a
Oh,
question about Gamergate thing. I will. I promise.
God.
But let's
Is there
save it for the
anything new
end.
to say about Gamergate? Is there anything new to say?
The,
Well,
the,
we haven't said it to each other. That's new.
Oh.
exactly. We will bury this hatchet, but first, right?
I am gonna spoil. I'm not gonna get in a fight tonight. I'm just not.
Okay, that's
I've had enough.
that's fine. That's fine. But let me ask this question instead. For now. What do we think is the most likely outcome of this upcoming election? So Tuesday, we got a glimpse, I think, of where, at least policy-wise, the electorate's at right now. Republicans got thrashed. Ohio formalized abortion, and it codified abortion, I should say, and it's Constitution. The Virginia, or the Kentucky, I should say, the Kentucky governor won re-election. He's a Democrat. Almost across the board, Democrats had a really good night. We could juxtapose that with the doom and gloom we saw on social media about how people never vote Democrat, never vote for Biden, never vote for anyone that isn't calling for a ceasefire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But do we think that this constant calls will have an effect going forward on the 2024 election? These constant calls to just boycott Biden, boycott the left or anything, or is this all just hot air?
I gotta be honest, I have not paid attention to American politics in the past week or so I don't know what you're
Useless
talking
to
about,
me. Okay, fair enough.
Sorry.
Woo, go ahead.
I think it's very serious. I think as part of my job, I did look a lot at the outcome from Tuesday. Obviously, I'm happy when Democrats win. Don't read too much into it. Okay, just don't. Biden's poll numbers are extremely weak right now. We're seeing the number of Muslims that are currently planning to vote for him. I'm not talking about Twitter conversations. I'm talking about real polls. It's not a good situation. His numbers with Jewish people are down as well. If the election were held today, Joe Biden would lose by a lot. And Joe Manchin is not deciding not to run again because he's tired of having power. He's not running again because he's looking at Biden. He's seeing a path for him to win the presidency. This is extremely obvious, and we need to take this really seriously. The reason Biden is failing right now in the polls is the first best job of the president is to lead on messaging. And look, I think he's been a really consequential president, but he is older, and it affects his ability to give speeches and connect emotionally with the public. And his current strategy of hiding is not working out. His campaign has $91 million on hand. The last time I checked, they need to be investing massively across the board in messaging and helping set a new conversation, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, Biden's kind of a zombie at this point. He's really old. There's no way to remedy that. When you're that old, you're just kind of done, to be honest. At the same time, like there have been some things to come out of his administration that I liked. I really like the CHIPS Act.
Yeah.
I have always I've been I feel like I'm a hipster when it comes to China. I was worried about them before it was cool to be worried about China. But like there's been some if you stay plugged into like the right wing online ecosystem, you'd think that the world's completely falling apart, and it's not.
No.
There's some problems, but it's not nearly that bad. But I do think that Biden I think based almost solely on his age, and now maybe on the October 7th response, like he might not be the guy for the Democrats. But at the same time, the Republicans are in shambles as well. You know, all of those Republican primaries are basically just the debate of who is going to eventually lose to Trump. And Trump seems to be he's not a very good president, and he's also extremely popular on the right.
Yeah.
So
we gotta get more serious.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, man, Trump's like a wild card right now, right? Because for 2024, imagine the possibility of Trump wins the election and then also gets convicted on one of those charges. What a shit show!
Oh my goodness.
Holy shit! But like, if Trump's gone, you know, if he actually is found guilty and he's locked away and he can't be president, like, who do the Republicans have?
I think this is what Ron DeSantis is hoping for, just a miracle at this point. So
Yeah.
I don't think they rally around DeSantis.
talking...
But anyway, I don't want to get too much into electorals.
Okay.
But
Right,
finish
sure.
your thought, Dev. And
basically, if we're just talking strategy, DeSantis should have waited. He should have waited for Trump to finally be either vanquished or get a second term, and then come along next time. This was not the time for this. I think DeSantis basically destroyed his political career jumping in.
maybe. I know that it would be an open question at this point, right? Who would take that standard from Trump if Trump goes away? Unfortunately, I don't think Trump's going away. I think that that Biden will be facing Trump in the 2024 runoff, and we'll see. I see the polling today. The polling isn't comforting, to say the least. But a year's a long time. I guess to kind of maybe bring it into something that you have been following. We've seen Israel's messaging of late. How do you think they're doing, Dev? Do you see the SNL style skit they did the other day?
No, I didn't see that either.
You didn't see
I,
Dev? What are you?
I've
Are you
been
not paying attention to anything
I've
going
been
on? What's
away
going
for a
on?
little bit. I've been away for a little bit. Sorry.
Oh, you killing me, bro. You kill me. Okay.
I do know that, like, man, when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict as a whole, I'm like soft pro-Israel, but soft pro-Israel, you know. But man, that's just a shit show. You have basically two sides that I think beneath the mask they both want to genocide each other. And one side is capable of doing it. The other side, if the power balance were reversed, they would be doing it. So it's like, well, what the fuck are you gonna do at that point? I don't think there's much that the West can do, frankly. I think it's like a hopeless situation.
Fair enough.
I think we are seeing. I was talking to a really good Jewish friend of mine about this, about why there's such a generational divide on Israel right now, and I think it really comes down to the fact. My friend, I believe he's in his 60s. I'm in my 40s, and we're both old enough to remember when Israel was really making a public messaging push and trying to help the public understand why, like, the need for Israel to exist was important, things like that. Right now, we're really seeing one side make that case, particularly to the left. And, I think that when Israel comes out and their response to a whole bunch of civilians getting killed in a strike that hits a hospital, to basically kill one person. It's like civilians die in war, which is nearly a direct paraphrase of what they said. It's really bad messaging, right? So I think anyone serious about national security will tell you that winning the hearts and minds of people, helping them understand and empathize with you is a really critical part of that. I think under Netanyahu, they're basically running the exact same playbook that Bush did, which is harder right, harder fringe messaging, doing it in really moral terms and not really making the effort to make the same number of friends. So no, Wick, I think Israel has been really, really bad at messaging lately. And I think if they don't change course, I think there's going to be less and less willpower in Washington to support them. So, and certainly all this, horrific, inexcusable level of civilian death is not aiding that either. So I think it's really dire.
It has been a kind of like a mind fuck almost to watch the horrific images coming out of Gaza, coming out of the airstrikes and things like, and then to have Israel put out an SNL skit about it, right? And you're like, someone is making these decisions consciously. Like, is someone they need to replace whoever is in charge of that. I understand why they're doing it. I understand why they think they need to use memes and comedy to appeal to the youth, because as polling recently has shown, to put it mildly, Israel has a youth problem here in the West. They have been bleeding support from, like, again, it's just a thing we grew up knowing that America supports Israel, but I don't know if that's going to be the same in 20 years from now, right? As a new cohort takes power, and seeing not only the online response but also the polling, also the massive amounts of youth, young people going into the streets, not just saying free Palestine, but gas the Jews, kill the Jews, Israel needs to be destroyed, intifada, intifada, from Britain to Gaza, right? There is a problem here. And I think Israel knows it has to try to reverse that trend. I just don't think it knows how.
I
What
don't
do you
think,
think
though,
it?
it's just a public messaging problem,
Yeah,
Wick. I think that, look, Netanyahu and Likud party, I mean, they've taken Israel in a very, very right-wing direction. And I think anyone that's been paying attention to this, including, I would say, the majority of Jews in this country, have been increasingly disturbed by the foreign policy direction of Israel for quite a while, right? So I certainly see that. I don't think it's just a messaging problem. I think it's actually kind of analogous to America's reputation in the world following the Iraq War,
no doubt.
right? You know,
No doubt. Any thoughts on this, Deb, before we move on?
If I were to like put myself in the headspace of somebody who, let's say, is very pro-Israel, who's in Israel and is very pro-Israel, I it feels like what they're probably thinking is something like they saw what happened on October 7th, and they saw all the memes come out about paragliders. And they're like, "Oh, okay, so I guess we're just cool with killing civilians and memeing about it now." And so they're saying, "Well, then let's do that for our side."
Fair enough. I think they don't realize, though, that's not how the game works here. We don't
yeah,
play
No,
fair,
it's not how the
right?
game works.
It's not
But
tit for tat. It's we do it to egg you on so that when you do it, we can call you out for it and ignore that we did it too, and then just paint you as
yeah,
the worst actor ever. Fair enough. Let me read a super chat I got for you, and then we'll move on to the next questions. $10 from Lives in Dev's Walls. I'm assuming it's someone from your community, sir.
yes,
How
he
do
lives
we
in my walls.
restore faith in or the integrity of necessary institutions amid clear failures? Stopping the spread of ludicrous conspiracies requires viable claims to be handled properly the way Epstein wasn't. And I would, and this is my words now, right, to maybe move away from the Epstein thing. One of the reasons that people think, especially the youth, think America bad is because of the horrendous way that America handled foreign policy with the Afghan and Iraq war, especially the Iraq war, right? And the just abysmal failures from the foreign policy community and how we have handled all these things. So, to his question, how do we restore faith in the integrity of it? Because just because America is wrong sometimes doesn't mean America is wrong all the time. But that seems to be the lesson that a lot of people took from the last 20 years is that America is just
Mhm.
bad, right?
So I can speak to this from the point of view of like more right wing people that I know, right? Because they all believe that 2020 was a stolen election. I did on the night of 2020, and I don't now. And I went through a process of figuring out why it wasn't. So I'm sure you've both seen that video that's been shared around millions of times, where the polling station closes up, and then one of the workers, pulls back the tablecloth and brings out a case of new ballots, right? Then wheels it over and starts counting. The narrative on the night of the election was that that was a case full of fraudulent ballots, right? And it needed to be investigated, and it needed to be answered for. Like, why is this woman pulling these ballots out? And that's what everyone was saying, including me, on the night of the election. Um, it turned out that as the court cases and went through, and the audits went through, and all these sorts of things to see if the election was actually real or not, it turns out that if you actually go back and like read some of the buried articles about that specific case, the judge said, "Okay, I sat down and I watched all the security camera footage, and that was actually a case full of legitimate ballots that was brought in earlier. And the reason that it was brought in is because Republicans in that state had changed the laws such that mail-in ballots could not be counted until after all the other ballots were counted. So they were just being stored under the table until it was time to count them." So it was actually one of those things where Republicans changed the law, and then it created a video that they then had a conspiracy theory about, right? But all of my right-leaning friends didn't keep up with any of these investigations or any of these trials or any of these audits. They had the 15-minute news cycle on Twitter, and then moved on to the next thing, right? And so after a month or two of investigations, no one's talking about it anymore. So pretty much like I kept my finger on the pulse of all these stories because I wanted to know, but like nobody else that I know on the right did. And now here we are 3 years on, and people are still bringing up that exact same video clip as if it's proof of something, and it's not. So I think it's social media, it's a shortened attention span, and it's people being in echo chambers. and that is causing people to spin up completely different theories about how things are actually functioning. And because they never actually return back to rethink those ideas through, they just kind of sit in their brains for a few years. That becomes what actually happened.
We see it playing out live. Like we see this video I saw of a helicopter, an Apache helicopter, blowing away Hamas terrorists. It was originally shared saying that it was Israel just indiscriminately firing into the crowd at the rave, killing both innocent civilians and Hamas terrorists. And see, look, the IDF caused most of these deaths. It was obviously shown to be no, they were attacking an entirely different place. These were just Hamas terrorists that were trying to run back into Gaza after they had done their thing. But it was too late. It had gotten millions of views,
Yeah.
hundreds and thousands of likes, and no one's going to go back to that, right? No one's going to check it again. It's now a fact, and they are going to run with it, right?
Yeah. After it goes viral, people aren't going to come back, a week later or a month later after the investigation's done. They're just going to remember it as it was.
I think that's why, look, I hear what you're saying about this being a problem. It's certainly correct. My mind always goes, what is the public policy solution? How can we start to do this? I think something I'm trying to do as a public figure and someone that works in this field is I'm trying to talk more with people on the other side and try to have civil conversations. I think it's really important for those of us to model this. I think that but I think the real problem that's really difficult to solve is it really comes down to the algorithm, right? We have a fundamentally different information space now that rewards sensationalism, it rewards conflict, it rewards hyperbole, and it's how do you square that with the fact I think all of us here agree with free speech, we agree with open expression, we don't want anyone censoring those hot takes. But we've got to come up with the way that the American people are being better served by the information that we're getting. And let's be really clear, this is not just an American problem. Democracy is weakening all around the world, and this being the way we consume information is part of why. It's destabilizing our country. So I think I think it's really, really important. And I don't think that, say, Facebook should have the amount of power it does over the news that they do. Maybe the answer is break them up. I truly don't know, but I think something's got to change.
I don't know about policy, like policies that can be adopted to improve this. I'm not sure about that. I do know that I have very little influence over policy, but I can control what I do, right? And so I can at least do better personally. And that's at least a little bit, like, if you are part of the world and if you do better, you've made the world slightly better. So if all I can do is look at it from an individualist perspective, then that's what I do.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. I'm going to ask the question that my audience.
Boy.
I know, but it's here. It's the elephant in the room. And again, well, we got to talk about it. Gamergate.
I've thought about the best way to do this conversation for a little bit now.
Well, then why not take it away, Dev? Then go ahead.
Okay. You don't have to get too in detail, I guess. But what was Gamergate about from your side, from your perspective? Because you were anti-Gamergate, I was pro-Gamergate. So since we're on opposite sides of the conversation.
I mean, have you seen me talk about this a million times in media? I mean, so Gamergate was about a organized harassment campaign against women in the game industry. I know y'all don't want to believe it was a real thing. It was. It hurt a lot of people's lives. It hurt reputations. Many of my friends quit the game industry permanently, and it was, in my view, the start of this playbook that when someone's saying or doing something you don't like, investigate them, go through everything they've ever said, find something to smear them with, and just try to destroy them with the mob.
Well, speaking of destroying with the mob, Sunday, thanks for watching. I see you making tweets about me. Yeah, I hope you like the channel as well. But continue.
So that's basically it.
What about you, Dev, from your perspective?
So, the pro Gamergate side is that it wasn't about harassment, and it was actually about there was ethical problems in the gaming industry at the time. And I was definitely on board for the ethical problems. Brianna, I think you saw my my video about Phil Fish and the investigation that I did like 10 years ago into the actual ethical problems that he was a part of, because he did do some underhanded stuff. Um, Stardust at one point, when she was going to talk to you, actually, like, was it 6 months ago or a year ago or something?
Yeah.
She asked me about Gamergate because she knew that I was involved in it, and I gave her my playlist of Gamergate videos, and she went through a few of them just to get a feeling of what it was like on the pro Gamergate side back then. And I watched a bit of her reacting to my old videos because I hadn't seen my videos in 10 years. And in the second video, I specifically say at the very start, okay, before we get into today's content, I see that some of you guys are actually harassing people, and you guys need not to do that. You need to stop
Sure.
that shit. So I was definitely, even back then, very cognizant about the fact that there were some people who were taking it too far, and also there were some people who were simply hitching themselves to the situation to try and boost their own career, right? People don't know this nowadays, but Milo came out of Gamergate, right?
Yep.
Um, uh, Mike Cernovich came out of Gamergate.
Milo
Yeah.
Yiannopoulos, to be clear?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They both
I
made
mean,
their
yeah, I don't have any issue with that. Yeah, I've been friends with Hat for, my God, 10 years now, right? Like, he's one of those people trained as a journalist, genuinely interested in the ethical concerns of that. I think if all of us on this show tonight agree that the outcome of progressive policies right now isn't always talking about healthcare. It's about a bunch of unrelated, like, cultural things that we do that are not ethical. I think we can be honest and admit, like, Gamergate did a lot of that as well.
What's your biggest regret, Dev? What's your biggest regret from the Gamergate years?
My biggest regret from the Gamergate years is that when Phil Fish sent me a cease and desist, I listened to it and I took my video down. Because I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have given in to that kind of intimidation.
Can you just remind me, I haven't spoken to Phil in like 10 years, but can you remind me what your ethical issue was with him?
Basically, his game Fez was the only
Yep.
game to win an award at the IGF for 2 separate years.
Sure.
And one of them was for the demo of Fez, and one of them was for the actual release of Fez. And the IGF kind of hand waved it by saying, "Oh, it's a demo, so it's not the same game, but it's the only game they gave that treatment to." And then when Phil Fish's company got hacked, it came out that there were a bunch of people who were judges at the IGF who had invested in his company, and they served, and they were in a position to personally profit from the fact that that Fez won so many awards, and was the only game to win awards in 2 separate years. It was like 2007 and 2012 or something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I'm not defending that. Fez is a really good game, though.
It is a really good game, yeah.
Yeah, but I hear you. That's not defensible. Obviously, they should have recused themselves. I just think, directionally, if you look at the state of the game industry today, I mean, let's just be blunt. IGN is weaker than it's ever been. Kotaku hasn't been a force in the game industry in a while. And, when it comes to game coverage, I think, people like SkillUp do a really good job. But I think there's a whole host of YouTubers that do a much, much worse job. And they are directly being paid by these companies to come cover their product, right? So I think if you look at, I just haven't seen that same level of anger at the current state of the game industry, which I think is way more rife with problems than it was a decade ago.
I mean, I'm still still a pretty small channel in terms of the big leagues, right? I know that like 150,000 subs is like kind of big, but it's also kind of small, to be honest. I don't have millions. I don't have that much reach.
Oh no,
I
so
still
small,
talk.
150,000.
Okay, you know what I mean. Though.
Here's
Like there's
sadness.
guys out there with millions of subs, and they have so
Go
much.
on.
I'm okay. What I mean to say is, like, I can only do so much, but I do talk about like shitty YouTubers as well
Sure.
on my channel. Yeah. I do my part.
Channel mostly, you showed a lot of progressives on TikTok. You have most of your videos are TikTok Tuesday nowadays, which is a shame because I like your long form content so much more.
It's only because I'm lazy.
And your situation with them causing so much noise at your house. So fair enough.
There's been some construction, and also I've been quite lazy.
Do you think I guess I'll ask this, right? For the many years you've been covering culture around games, etc., um, Dev, what is have we improved overall, or as Brianna Wu has asserted, have we just gotten worse? I know for me, right, when I was growing up and I wanted to know if a game was good, there was some magazines I would read or pick up, or
Nintendo Power.
yeah, things like that. And I
Yeah.
would look through
Yeah,
them and I
no
would get the
ethical issues
strategy.
there. No ethical
Yeah,
issues.
I would get the strategy guides and things like that, and I would pour through them. I would go to Blockbuster and look at the cool games that were up for rent, and I'd do that. Nowadays, if I want to get a game, right, or if I want to see if a game is worth getting, I will go and look at either a YouTube playthrough through it and see some reviews, or a Let's Play. I will go to the Steam user reviews and kind of click through a few of them, positive, negative. So that, as a normie, someone who isn't like a super gamer, that's how I usually engage with the gaming industry today versus back then. So I guess from someone who covers that kind of thing and someone who I would consider much more of a gamer and a nerd than I am, Dev, what better, worse? What do you think?
I don't think it's better or worse. I think it's very different. Things have definitely changed, but I think we're probably about the same level as we were 10
Well,
years ago.
then
I don't think
let's
it's
let's
gotten
go to
worse.
individual. Let's go away from the overall then. So what in individual instances, what do we do better and what do we do worse?
Okay. Well, gaming press, like you said, Brianna, gaming press is definitely weakened, right? Like all these sites are shutting down, and the institution, the career of journalist doesn't have the prestige that it used to have. So that's probably worse, right? And now you can argue whether or not that's because they were bad at their jobs or whether it was because we don't respect them anymore. It's probably a mix of both because there's been some really bad journalism as well. The issue with YouTubers, and this goes beyond what you're mentioning, Wick, but it does also involve this. Um, is that YouTubers don't take themselves seriously enough, I think, and streamers don't take themselves seriously enough. This is not related to gaming, but
Have you met streamers? Like we take
no,
ourselves way too seriously, but go on.
I meant in terms of like professional ethics.
Oh, fair
So
enough. That's
yeah,
true. But we take
so like
ourselves super seriously. Go
no,
on.
drama, yes, but like okay, this is not related to gaming, but it definitely you can use this logic on a whole bunch of gaming YouTubers, right? Do you remember recently, Hassan? I think he went on. It was on national TV or it was somewhere, and he said, "I'm just a streamer, man. I have no control over anything. I can't control what my audience does. I can't set any sort of narrative." And it's like, hold on. If you're the biggest leftist streamer in the world, you should have some ability to set the narrative.
Are we talking about Hamas Piker? Okay, carry on.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the fellow we're talking about. But like, that's not gaming. But the point still stands: is that like if you have a platform, and it's a reasonably big platform, like if we're talking like millions of subs or tens of thousands of viewers on Twitch or something, you do have the ability to set conversations basically.
Yeah.
And I think that streamers, they when it comes time for them to, let's say, be ethical in how they behave, they say, "I'm just a guy in my living room or in my bedroom. I don't know what's going on. I can't affect anything." But when it comes time for them to take massive bags of cash from Ubisoft or whoever, they take the massive bag of cash. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Let me ask you directly then.
Okay.
How do you fail your audience in this? How do you abdicate your responsibility? Have you, or are you above the fray?
Well, I don't take massive bags of cash. That's one thing. Like
Okay.
I've made a deal with myself that if I'm ever going to do like a product sponsorship, for example, it has to be something that I actually like and use myself. I won't like I don't use VPNs. Until I start using one, I'm not going to take a deal for a VPN for my channel, right? It's one of
Interesting.
those types
Okay.
of things. That's kind of how I view it. Is like I want, even if you disagree with me, I want people to trust in the fact that I'm saying what I actually think, even if you don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way. I take a lot of pride in my professional integrity. I mean, I really try very hard to tell the truth. I try to answer questions even when they're unpleasant, when they're asked of me. And I try to engage issues honestly. And sometimes that comes from critiquing my own side. And it's hard. I mean, I feel like all the incentives now, this is something I see over and over again in the streaming space. Like, Wick, my assessment is there are a lot of really fundamentally dishonest people in this space. It's really hard trying to figure out who to talk to, who to interact with, who not to.
What have you like? So I know we've talked off screen, right,
Sure.
about different people and things like that, but I just want to get a. Well, I have two questions for you. One to go back to the same question I asked Dev, and
Mhm.
speaking of asking hard questions, I know you talked about how one of your regrets is keeping it online and not taking it offline and do things. But other than that, regarding your behavior towards others, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a regrets
Oh
when
my
it comes to
God.
behavior? Can you maybe
Absolutely.
talk about that a little bit? And then I my second question to keep in mind would be since we live in, as Dev said, a space where there are people with a lot of influence who's abdicated for it, how do you sift the wheat from the chaff? Who do you decide how to? Why did you pick me to work with instead of Sunday, for example? Like how do you filter? I guess. Go on.
Well, you're not a congenital liar, so I
Well,
think that
true,
would be
but
number
no, you know
one.
what I mean. I'm being hyperbolic, but you know what I'm saying. How do
So,
you sift the wheat from the chaff?
so I feel like I've answered the same question a million times. I'll do it again. I know Gamergate wants to pretend like what they did didn't traumatize me, but it did. I had a clinical case of trauma. A lot of women in the game industry also had clinical cases of trauma. It fucking broke me, the stuff that went on. So I can look back at my behavior and see how reactive and angry I was, and I was not always responding to things in a way that was productive, right? So I think if I did it over again, I would have unplugged from Twitter a lot sooner. I think I would have held on a lot of media appearances until I could react without so much anger in the moment. So I just feel like I squandered this opportunity to really advocate for better policy for women in the game industry. And just on a personal note, I cause so much pain. Like, one of the things is when you're traumatized, you hurt the people around you. I hurt my friends. I hurt, I love Frank dearly, but I think he saw me at the worst in some ways during Gamergate, right? Um, so just in the midst of trauma, I acted with a lot of pain and did things I'm not proud of, right?
Yeah.
I do want to point out real quick that
Sure.
my my involvement with Gamergate was only on the ethics side of it, and I certainly wasn't responsible for any of that. I'm sorry that it happened to you, though.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can we consider the hatchet buried of enemies of old?
I mean,
Have they become
Dev,
at
I
least
consider
not
you a
enemies
friend.
anymore? You
I
know?
mean, well, maybe not a friend. I think we have a
Oh,
respect for
okay.
each other. We have a respect for each other, right? Like, I like you. I like your content. I don't agree with you
I preferred
politically,
friend, but
but
okay.
Oh, if you want to be my friend, I'll be your friend.
What's
Sure.
Dev?
Yeah.
What's your favorite part? What's your favorite thing about Brianna Wu today? What's your favorite? What's Brianna Wu's best quality? What do you like about her most? Friend of Brianna Wu, Dev.
Irrespective of how victimized you were 10 years ago,
Mhm.
you definitely had some crazy takes
Yeah.
back then, and you do not seem like that crazy person now. And that's actually quite heartening because so many people just get worse over time.
Well, I
I'm
do
sure that
think
that probably
running for
sounded like a
no,
backhanded compliment. I
no,
didn't mean it to be, but
I
hopefully you
get
know what I
it.
mean.
I
Yeah.
think that running for office did teach me a hell of a lot about how to advocate for things that I believed in, right? So I think that was part of it. It was a real growing up experience. So thanks, I guess. I would hope that you would see me as somebody with
Thanks, I
integrity.
guess.
I
Wow. Okay.
mean, you know,
I,
Do you make friends a
I
lot, Dev?
think
Do you
I
have a
do.
lot of friends? Like, just
Um,
curious.
kind of.
Okay.
I have
You recognize that it
basically
was just a like kind of a shit
it's
answer, but go on. Yeah.
no, it's what there's a lot of people that I think can't stand me. And sometimes I wonder why, and it's like, well, is it my personality that's the problem? Is it like, but then I realize usually it's because like I'm pretty honest, and that can drive a lot of people away. And it doesn't mean that I'm like a perfect truth teller. I talk the same way online as off. I talk the same way public as in private. I found that just like keeping secrets and kind of like being a backroom schemer, it makes you a worse person in the long run. So I
Yeah.
don't do that, and that rubs some people the wrong way. But
$5 from Cryborn to say, I like Brianna's pragmatism and recent work with bringing together left-wing streamers. Thank you for the $5, and thank you for a good
Appreciate
example
that.
of a good answer to that question.
Thank you.
I guess, well, same thing. I think you already said about his videos, but
Yeah.
you consider him a friend. What about
Yeah.
him that you like, right? Personally.
I think you have really insightful criticisms of the right and the left. I don't think you're as much of a centrist from my point of view as I think you tell yourself that you are. But I
am I a right
think
winger
you
from your
are.
point of view?
I'm sorry.
Am I a right winger from your point of view?
I don't know if right winger. I think you have a kind of instinctual distrust of anything. I think that when someone comes to you and tells you they don't feel like they're getting a fair shake in society, I think you have a kind of instinctual tendency to dismiss that. And I don't think you're coming to that like inauthentically, or I don't think it's egregious, right? I don't think it's the right answer, right? But what I appreciate about you is I think in the course of I think you produce some extremely thoughtful videos. I think you're actually a really friendly person, and honestly, this is a silly thing, but the way you talk about your is it your girlfriend or your wife, Naomi? It's really apparent how much you care for her, and I think that I don't know, it just makes my heart grow 3 sizes every time I hear that.
I'm actually told that a lot. That like whenever our relationship bleeds into online, people really like it.
Yeah.
So I guess
How
there's
did
something
y'all
there.
meet, if I can ask?
Um, we both worked the same awful part-time job back when I was in school,
Yeah.
and we just kind of stayed together even after I left.
No.
$5 from Artemis Fowl. Dev is my favorite white nationalist communist. Thank you.
Oh my God. So yeah, like there was that one short of Demon Mama. Demon Mama's called me a fascist so many times at this point. But there was that one where like it was Demon Mama was lambasting you for talking to me, Brianna.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, I can go to some very far right YouTube channels where I'm being discussed, and I'm like this leftist, subversive, communist cuck who's trying to get into right wing spaces to like convert people. So, one of the big reasons why I do think that I'm a centrist is because so many people say the same things about me on two extreme sides, but they're inverted. And it's like, okay, there's something here. I think there's
But
something
I
here.
deal with that too, Dev. That doesn't make me a centrist. I'm not. Like the exact same thing happens to me. I have the left screaming at me. I've certainly had the right screaming at me. I mean, how is it's the same thing, right?
Maybe the difference. Um, I have a saying. I think this is gonna become my dev saying. This would be my branding. It's this idea that governments should be liberal and people should be conservative. And that's kind of how I lay out my approach to politics because
Can you
at this
elaborate on
point,
that? Out of
sure,
curiosity? Yeah.
sure. So when it comes to government policy, like big ticket things, what federal level governments should do in America or in Canada or in other similarly sized states, I tend to agree more with liberals than with conservatives. Not consistently, I'm definitely more pro gun than the average Canadian for sure. But I mean, my stance on healthcare, I think Americans who aren't terminally online would consider to be far left, right? Something like that. However, when it comes to how I think you should organize your life on a personal level, on like a local level, I'm much more conservative because I think those things are generally just better for people, right? Like having a good family life, for example. That's more of a conservative thing than let's say a progressive thing. But it's very important for people, right? Having like more traditional family roles. People tend to be happier on average when they engage with those types of lifestyles. Doesn't mean you should be forced into it. There's lots of conservatives that think that you should be forced into it. I don't think that at all, right? If you're cut from a different cloth, then go ahead and do your thing, right? Here's a good example. Okay, so I think I was talking to Dylan Burns a few months back, and I was outlining to him, the conservative case for gay marriage, right? And basically, the argument that I was explaining to him is, let's say that you're a young gay man, and you have two life paths ahead of you, right? And down one life path is you could get into like a monogamous relationship and adopt some kids and raise them right, get a decent job and contribute to your community, be a productive person, but these are all very conservative things, even though it's a gay person doing them. Or you could, go to the gay bar and be very promiscuous, maybe catch a few diseases, debase yourself, debase other people, make people not proud of you. What would be, you're allowed to engage in hedonism because that's what a free society is. But what should you do? What would be better for you? What would be better for the people around you? If what character should you have as a person, right? And it seems like more often than not, organizing your life in a conservative way, not necessarily a religious way, but a conservative way, does seem to make people happier and healthier. So, on the local level, I'm pretty conservative. On the national level, I'm pretty liberal.
Right on.
I've been married for 15 years. I have a pretty, I've got a house, I've got a job, like I certainly agree with that. I think where I would really ask you, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but my critique of you would be the exact same as Tim Pool in the sense that there's such a disproportionate amount of criticism that I think happens on your channel, right? And I agree with that. Like I certainly have had plenty of criticism for the fringe left lately, but it's also true my day job is 100% about beating the Republicans at the ballot box, right? That's what I'm paid, to do. So, I mean, how can you see yourself in the middle when so much of your content is about going after the left?
The main reason I do that is because criticism of the right's very simple, right? We all kind of intuitively get it. It's like, should you oppress gay people? No. Obviously, right? Like, should you be racist? No. It doesn't take much brain power to explain why you shouldn't be a racist or why you shouldn't be a homophobe. You can easily lay these arguments out. Criticism of the left is complex. It takes a lot more thought. Yeah, you have to understand a lot more about certain things, because I think it's not that leftist ideas are necessarily more complicated. It's that they're more ubiquitous. You know what I mean? It's like what is your stereotype of a conservative? It's like a redneck living in a flyover state who's kind of uneducated. He might be a bigot, right? He's kind of an easy enemy to attack in a sense. Like what is your average left leaning person? Well, he generally higher IQ, generally makes more money, lives in a more affluent area. He seems to have more markers of success going his way. It is, in terms of philosophy, leftism, I think, is in a stronger position than rightism, and so it requires more in-depth critiques.
I think I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. The problem with leftism is a more interesting conversation. I think a problem I see consistently on your channels, I think you really underestimate the cultural power of the right. I just went to South Carolina to debate John Doyle. I talked to a lot of students on campus. I talked to a lot of people down there in the South. It was really conservative. And I think that your vantage point of living in Canada and having your perceptions of the country primarily filtered through media. I think if you had worked an election cycle in Ohio or New Hampshire, I think that would really change your perception very, very quickly.
Might be the case. It's also might be the case that Canada does not have the same kind of right wing that America does.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's just also like just a true statement, right? Yes, obviously Canada right wing and America right wing, I think, are not in the same place. And now you can point to some overlap. I know that Canadians often complain about how American politics kind of seeps over the border a little bit and influences their electorate and things like that. Yeah, it's just different problems, different things. If I may read a couple super chats, and then I will kind of wrap this up. But I want to take calls. Do you guys want to take some calls? Right?
Yeah, let's do
Get some
it.
people in here. But let me read these
Sure.
super chats and have some closing thoughts here, and then we'll get into some
I had a
talk.
couple of questions I wanted to ask Deb before
Oh
we jump
no!
off.
If
Yeah,
you have more
go
questions,
ahead. You
by
go
all
ahead.
means,
You go ahead.
I'll step back. But
Read
money
your
first.
super chat. Yes.
Money
okay.
first. $5 from Lives and Death Walls. Public service announcement. Just buy a tortilla press and masa harina. More than worth the extra effort for the difference in quality. The leftovers can be made into chips. Well, thank you for such a that service announcement. It will be go to service. And $2 from the same individual. Nooms is cool. I'm assuming Nooms is Naomi.
Yes.
But I could
Yeah.
very be wrong. Fair enough.
I gotta go though. I'll be back in a second.
Oh, and I guess in the meantime, then, gang, if you're liking this content, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, feel free to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're following me on Kick or on Twitch, hit the follow button and throw some bits my way, subs my way. If you want to have your chat read on stream, I will do so for your money. If you give me your money, I will read it. We got some great things coming up. Next week on Monday, we're going to have Pixie, we're going to have Xena, and we're going to have Cherry. We're going to talk about mental illness in the streaming world. That should be fun. Tuesday will be Food Shops versus Admiral Gibbs. Admiral Gibbs has made the audacious claim that Food Shops supports Hamas, and so we're going to have him defend his assertion, and Food Shops will be there to challenge that. I am also going to be talking to No Opinion, Sock Done Left, and Brianna Wu on Thursday, the 16th.
Yes. Yes.
That will be fun. I don't know if you guys know who No Opinion is. He's one of the largest I think he is the largest Substack out there. He's got hundreds and thousands of followers and readers. And he's been making blog posts about Sock Done Left and Brianna Wu. Brianna Wu, you got to mention in his latest one. I don't know if you read it. And so, yeah, we connected and he wants to talk to him. And so I'm going to facilitate that conversation. That should be fun.
I'm really looking forward to that. He is so smart and so thoughtful. I really appreciate him.
Well, he's very left leaning, right? But I think
Yeah.
he sees a lot of the same. Well, what's the title of his latest piece? Let me get it up a second. It's basically, yes, it's possible to imagine progressive dystopias. So he has seen a lot and been very critical of the far left's response, some among the far left's response to the October 7th thing. And so he has really come out and stood against that. So it should be a fun and interesting discussion.
He's also so pro national security, very, very smart on national security, and
Absolutely.
not in this war hawk, like, let's bomb our way to utopia kind of way. Like, really thoughtful about, what our investment in the military gets us, the good sides, the downsides, our need to, think about when we're talking America withdrawing from the world, what happens when China and Russia go into the power vacuum. Just a really thoughtful person. So I'm really looking forward to this.
I'm very, very curious. $10 from Artemis Fowl. Can anyone tell me why lefties are up in arms about giving Palestinians a state/one state, but don't say anything about Kurdistan or Tibet? Seems like progs are simply hypocritical. I, for one, remember when Free Tibet was the left's reason to tear, right? Like they were very big on Free Tibet. I don't know. To answer your question, Artemis Fowl, I'm not sure. What do you think?
What do I think about
what
that?
do you think?
No,
We're waiting for
really
Dev to
agree
get
with
back.
that.
He's abandoned it.
I think that there's something. I don't want to accuse people of like it only being about anti-Semitism, but it's hard to not notice that some people are being held to a different rule set when it comes to this. So maybe a more charitable answer would be that looking at the oppressor-oppressed dynamics and having that be your pathway to coming up with every single answer is not always a very good way to do it.
Probably so. Welcome back,
I'm
Dev.
back. I'm back. Yeah.
I know
Honestly,
Brianna. Go on.
I think when it comes to Tibet, It's honestly because 20 years ago, China was not nearly as powerful as it is now. That's just it.
And you think because they are now a major power that the left has stopped?
They're a major power, and there's multiple avenues for them to morally browbeat people who are far left. They can use the race angle. They can use the socialist angle. It's very easy for them to say whatever it is to get them to stop talking about Tibet.
Okay.
Because that was like a leftist cause 20 years ago. I
Yeah,
remember that very clearly.
absolutely. Free Tibet was a
Yeah.
big thing.
Mhm.
I know that Brianna had questions.
Just
for
a
you,
couple of questions.
and
Okay,
I wanna
Dev,
get
I
that
want you
into.
to look over here. Do you see this corner of my office? That is an original Parasite Eve poster from
Nice.
Japan. And that is the
That's
original
awesome.
Final Fantasy VIII poster from Japan. Those cost me an ungodly amount of money. So I wanted to ask, why are these both? This is the soundtrack to your channel. So I've always wanted to ask you: is Parasite Eve is that an important game for you, the same way it is for me?
Um, I don't know how important it is. I don't think it's on my top 10, but it's on my top
Really?
20. It's on my top 20 for sure.
As far as the
It's
soundtrack, it's got to be in the top 10
oh,
there.
so
Yeah.
when I'm choosing soundtracks, I'm looking for something that fits a specific. It's not droning. Droning's not the right word, but it's kind of like droning, where it's almost like investigative. All right. So I use
Yeah. That's why I
um
use the Timber soundtrack.
well, that one's not investigative. That one's goofy,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
But like Parasite Eve, a lot of Parasite Eve tracks, the police station for sure, and also the
Ooh,
Central Park track.
yes.
Those are both they both feel like you're in an investigation, so I use those for investigative videos. Um,
Oh, I was hoping you were a huge fan. That's so
well, no,
sad.
I am a huge fan, but I'm not like they're like oh, man. It is in my top 20, so I guess I am like a pretty big fan, but I'm not like the top tier of fan, if that makes sense.
Okay.
My
Fair enough.
my favorite game of all time is Earthbound, which is a very lefty
Woo!
answer. I love Earthbound.
Good game. I have an
It's a good game.
original Earthbound, and I don't even want to tell you how much I spent on that.
Is it in box with the book
No, no, I
and
don't do that. I have games to play. So,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I love that thing. Oh my gosh. I think, for all this talk about like making America great again, I think that there's a political movement based on just bringing back the greatness to the video game industry of that PS1 Squaresoft era of games, which gave you Vagrant Story, which gave you Einhander, which is this undervalued, amazing PS1 shooter with the most amazing soundtrack, like all the Final Fantasies, Final Fantasy Tactics, all of
Mhm.
these games. Make a movement to like bring that back to the game industry, and I don't even care if it's fascism. I will be on board with that. I miss that so much.
Yeah, there were some good games, and man, their attempts to like redo it, they're really hit and miss. Like you go play like
Oh
Octopath
yeah,
Traveler, like
yeah,
Octopath Traveler is pretty good, but it's not the same as like Final Fantasy VI.
It
yeah.
You know,
lacks
it's not. It's
a kind of, it's hard to put my finger on, right? It's the certain je ne sais
Pacing.
quoi, if you will. It feels too formulaic, too clean, too
yeah. When it comes
too
to
processed, I guess.
when you're playing Octopath Traveler, it's the fact that you can play as all the characters or none at any point in time, so they can't have any meaningful interactions with each other. So it's always like
A lack of
everyone's
meaningful
story.
choice is what you're saying to me?
No, not choice, interactions. So if you
Interesting.
play like a Final Fantasy VI or a Final Fantasy VII, the characters are always going to have the same interactions at the same point in the story, right?
Yeah,
If you play it multiple times. If you play Octopath Traveler, because you can recruit the characters in any order you want, all of their plot lines happen independently of each other, and they never had like the characters never feel like they're actually on an adventure together, and that's a big problem.
Mhm.
Second big problem is that the writing is just needs to be edited down. There's like
yeah,
3 times too much dialogue in Octopath. And I
yeah.
think that's because like if you're thinking back to like the PS1 or the SNES era, like and you're thinking back to when you were like 9 years old or something, because I was pretty young when those games came out. The it feels like in your memory there's way more dialogue than there actually is. Like
Yeah.
if you go back to like Final Fantasy VI right now and just like emulate it and speed through it, there's not that much dialogue, not really. But it felt like a lot as a kid. So to get the same feel, they just bloat the dialogue up in a game like Octopath Traveler, and it's just way too much.
I feel like one of the things that made Final Fantasy VI so good is they really thought about the amount of grinding that you have to do. One of the reasons 8 is so great is because grinding doesn't do anything for you in Final Fantasy 8. And you can actually, like, you can do a Final Fantasy 6 playthrough in 10 hours if you know where you're going. So I think these games are so bloated nowadays that they lose a lot of that magic, in my view.
Yeah.
Um,
I think a lot of the bloat really comes from the fact that when you were a kid, 60 hours seemed like a lot more than it does when you're an adult.
Yeah,
And also, that was your one game for like 6 months or something.
True.
yeah,
If you couldn't afford to
100%.
get any more. Yeah.
um,
I like all the same games that you do.
well, you mentioned
Yay!
earlier in this conversation, right? Like the too much access. I think that maybe too with games is the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Too
It's also
much, too
that's
much
also
choice.
part of it. There's too much.
$50,
S
just real quick.
Yep.
$50 from Mark Twain's Revenge. Do you guys think that fundamentalist Islam, which compels men to emulate the Prophet Muhammad, is inherently dangerous for all non-fundamentalist Islamists? It's a spicy
Oh,
one.
boy.
That's pretty spicy.
Anyone want to take a crack at it?
Well, so, I mean, the answer is going to be yes on some level. And you can make the same argument for other religions. Like every religion has its fanatical version that is dangerous to other people. I think Islam might be unique because it carries within it a doctrine of how to set up a religious state, and most religions don't have that in their doctrine. So it might be uniquely dangerous. That doesn't mean obviously that all Muslims are dangerous or anything like that.
I think that if you got out into the world in the Democratic Party, you would see that, at least here in this country, a lot of the Muslim Americans that are here are some of the most progressive, thoughtful, smart, kind, loving people that you will ever meet in your whole life. Like Cenk is not, he's not a Muslim like extremist when it comes down to it. So I'm not comfortable with blanket statements like that. I think that a lot of Muslim countries are not democracies, and I think that that obviously causes a lot of problems and repression.
Mhm. I mean, it's the same. It's the same. Like Canada doesn't really have like a huge Muslim population, but we have a very big Sikh population. It's the same
Mhm.
with them, right? Like their religion is overall very peaceful, and yet Canada has recently had like the Sikh terrorist issues, which
Oh
probably
boy.
didn't make it into the American news. But like, there's stuff happening up here that
Well,
it's like, well,
assassinated
that's
one of
not
them,
all
right?
Sikhs, obviously.
I think
Yep.
India struck them, like killed one of the Sikhs in Canada, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
it's a big thing.
the TLDR of that is that the Sikhs want like an they want an ethno state for the Sikh religion in India in an area called Khalistan. They're trying to break it off. The Indian government obviously doesn't want that. There is a big I think the violence hit its peak in '85 when they blew up a flight going to Canada. The
All right.
bomb blew up a flight.
All right.
And
So, oh, go ahead.
oh, well, okay, real quick. The TLDR is that a bunch of the Khalistani extremists moved to Canada. They kind of blended in because Canadians are like they're very nice and polite and open and welcoming from their country. So of course come here, of course, not knowing what was actually happening. And so now there is this growing Khalistani issue in Canada, where Canada might be harboring some legit terrorists, and India has now assassinated one of them on Canadian soil, which has caused an international incident. So
Absolutely.
that's something happening here that Americans aren't paying attention to it because it's
And
happening in
just
Canada, right?
real quick, $5. Is Islam right about women?
That is a troll.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay,
Obviously not.
Artemis Fowl. I know him.
Oh,
He donates a lot of money and he
yes,
he trolls every
I
single time.
I am okay with that. But you had a question, a last question, Brianna, and we have some
No.
callers backstage, gang. If you want to get in line, well, they were backstage. Where'd they go? Exclamation point Discord and chat, or click the link that I provided in the YouTube chat. Accept the rules, and then jump backstage, and we'll pull you on one at a time to talk to these wonderful individuals. But go ahead, last one.
I'm good to go. Let's get to the callers.
Oh no! Was it like a video game question, maybe?
It's covered. It's covered. I'm cool.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Actually, no, I have a question for you then. Okay, so
Yep.
like you're very clearly a SquareSoft fan from back in the
Yes.
day. Yeah. Okay. Um, you like Earthbound, so you have to like RPGs. Probably like Chrono Trigger as well, I
Yeah.
assume.
Who
Chrono
doesn't
Trigger's
like
part.
Chrono Trigger, right?
It's really good. It's really good.
Yeah.
How about like Western RPGs, like Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines? That's considered a
Ooh.
classic.
It's good. I've never done a complete playthrough of it. I mean, does Mass Effect count as a Western RPG? I think that's the greatest
Yeah.
video game ever made. I mean, by
Wait, which one
far.
of the three?
Well, 2 is obviously the best, but all 3 of them in order? I mean, come on, that's the greatest story our industry has
I
ever produced, in my view.
I keep everyone says 2 is the best. I think 1 is better than 2.
The story is better, but the gameplay is not.
I like that old style of kind of uncompromisingly janky gameplay.
Well, which class do you play? Because I do assassin and a sniper rifle, so maybe that's why we have a different perspective.
Engineer.
So I've never done an engineer playthrough. How does that work?
Um, well, in the future games, you get drones
Ooh.
and you get turrets, and those are really nice. You can basically like there's a way to play Mass Effect where it's basically the loneliest shepherd, where you recruit as few people as possible, you kill off as many partners as possible, and
Ooh.
you go it alone for as much as the game. And you play an engineer so that all you have are like robot buddies. It's a really fun way to play the game, but like it's everyone is dead, and you can actually pretty much break the game by the end of the playthrough in Mass Effect 3 because the game doesn't know what to do because everyone's gone.
So if you're on Vermeer, you're sending Ashley and Caden to go die, basically. Like, figure out how to do that.
um, okay, one last question.
Yes.
How about Deadly Premonition?
I don't know this game. What are you talking about?
It is a horror game from the
Oh,
360.
yes, I remember this. This is the one where paranoia affects your sense of stuff, right?
No,
Okay, I'm thinking of
not
something
no.
else.
It's basically Twin Peaks the game,
Oh my god. Hmm.
and I definitely have like a hipster sense of taste when it comes to games and TV and movies. So I love Twin Peaks. I love that whole aesthetic and that type of storytelling. And Deadly Premonition is Twin Peaks the game. It recently got a Switch re-release. You can play it on modern consoles, but it's like unfinished and kind of comedically unfinished, but the charm of the game is just it's over the top. I love it. It's
Yeah.
on my list of top 10 is Twin Peaks. No,
See,
sorry, Deadly Premonition, yeah.
I like it when your channel talks about games. You had a really salient, thoughtful analysis of Final Fantasy 16 that I didn't agree with all your conclusions, but I thought it was a really interesting thought, like analysis of the plot and the political subtext of it. So I wish you'd do more of that.
There's one coming tomorrow.
Uh-oh.
Oh, fancy.
There's
Okay.
one so yeah, the TLDR of it is basically there's this idea that conservatives they're media illiterate. You know, we were talking about this before before we started. The idea is like they watch The Boys and they see Homelander and then they like seal clap, not recognizing that it's criticizing America and criticizing like American like exceptionalism, right? And there's probably a lot of truth to that. At the same time, though, there's this view again, mainly among bread tubers. All right, it is leftist crazies who are terminally online. They believe that like all media and all entertainment media has messages that are exclusively for them. And if conservatives enjoy something that they're coping or they're like intellectually dishonest or they have some sort of dissonance in their heads, and it's like no 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 no. There are actually good conservative stories, right? Legend of Zelda, I gave you the example. Legend of Zelda is a conservative story because in every single game, Link is restoring the monarchy. All right, there is a hard conservative subtext in Legend of Zelda for sure. So I'm making the argument
Libtards
for
coping and ceasing right now.
I'm making the argument that there are definitely like more
Ganon is
conservative slanted.
authoritarian, though. Ganon is authoritarian.
Yeah, of course he is. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, authoritarianism isn't exclusively a rightist thing. And
Yeah.
monarchy is certainly exclusively a rightist thing. Every single time Link puts Princess Zelda back on the throne, that is reaffirming monarchy.
It's unclear how much political power Zelda actually holds,
I
though.
am not prepared for this debate, but fair enough, let's do it. But let me read these first. $5 from Temperance Quill for giving me lovely background noise while I work. Love the conversation. And £5 from Conas X. Since Vampire the Masquerade was mentioned, I am dying to hear Dev's opinion on Werewolf the Apocalypse, the tabletop, not the video game.
I don't know much about it. Sorry.
Yeah.
My only experience with what is it called? Like it's called the Dark something, that universe. I don't know what it is. My only experience is with Vampire, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Gang, yeah, call in. There was a few of you earlier waiting, and then we took too long, I guess. But I guess we're going to go into the call-in portion. So if you've been watching this and you have questions that you think, Wick, why didn't you bring this up? Wick, why didn't you ask BRIANNA about this? Wick, why didn't you hold Dev's feet to the fire about this? Right? Now's your chance to call in and talk to these lovely individuals.
Yeah, we've had a nice, pleasant conversation. Let's add some conflict into it.
Let's ruin it by bringing in the chatters, okay? Well, you know you're dirty chatters, okay? You're only there to be seen, not heard normally, but now I am dining and giving you, I am condescending to opening up the floor to you, dear chatter, for a brief moment in time, to fill that void that exists within your empty lives with a little bit of attention, right? So jump backstage. Oh, I see we're getting a couple callers right now, but jump backstage and we'll pull you in. $2. Dev, where's the trucker video?
Plus 1 day.
Plus 1 day. Let's bring in the first caller. Hello. You're live.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hi.
It's too friendly in here. I'm gonna try to get you guys to fight with each other a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, maybe. My question is mainly for BRIANNA. If you want to answer, you can. You guys briefly touched on cancel culture earlier. I was just curious, BRIANNA, if you see any, because to me there's a pretty discernible party line between the type of emotion that the phrase cancel culture evokes in people. Like people, right-leaning conservatives tend to think of it as the villain, the big bad bogey, and then left-leaning people generally see it as a dog whistle for basically anti-wokeness or anti-progressivism. As a progressive yourself, do you see any? Can you identify any concerning aspects of cancel culture, like what it's done to progressives?
Well, yeah, first of all, I think this is one of these things where no one is taking a long enough historical view on this. I'm old enough to remember what happened to people that spoke out against the Iraq War, of which I was one of them, right? And there was a very real sense that if you spoke out against President Bush right after 9/11, that you would lose your job. There was, so I think the conservatives have been running, cancel culture for a long time. Yeah, I think I have a different assessment. I don't, I do think I actually want higher standards for people in how we express ourselves publicly. But I think it's really obvious that this current playbook of trying to get everyone fired over the most minor statements and just making witch hunt the way that we advocate for change, it's not working. I think a lot of people think progressives are assholes. Now, I think that we have less cultural power today than we did 10 years ago. And I think there is certainly an illiberal element to this. I think that no matter your views, at the end of the day, we're a democracy. We need to settle our differences at the ballot box. And I think there does need to be more tolerance for allowing people on the other side to have their say. So I realize that's a more nuanced view than just cancel culture bad, but this stuff is really free speech is there's a lot it really matters how you approach that principle and how you safeguard it, right? Just to give one super quick example, when it comes to national security, we all agree with free speech, but Russia is weaponizing our ideals against us, and by using bot farms to exacerbate our divisions here in this country, make it seem like things are more inflamed than they are. And now the new warfare against the United States it happens with trying to basically inflame these differences between people. What is the answer for that? We can't start just censoring people disagreeing with each other, but we should certainly have a policy to identify bot farms. So all this stuff is really complicated.
Okay, do you care more about progressives looking like assholes, or do you care more about potential sustained casualties from people catching strays, I guess, from as a result of cancel culture and what it's done to progressivism?
I genuinely care about both. I think both are extremely high downsides. On a priority list, I would say both of those are an A-level priority.
Okay.
Yeah.
SFO, do you agree with BRIANNA, or do you have a more negative outlook on it?
You have to repeat a little bit. Sorry, I spaced it
I'm
out.
just
Sorry,
curious.
dude.
So BRIANNA has identified basically that cancel culture. Why don't you? I don't want to. BRIANNA, if you could give them a summation briefly.
It started with Dixie Chicks, basically, or like didn't start, but like the right was doing it earlier, and you had like Dixie Chicks get canceled. I remember that from back in the day too. Yeah.
But I do think phrasing it as conservatives have been running cancel culture for a long time is probably not the most accurate way of characterizing it.
I don't think
that
this is the
when
dark
people
part
think
of the human heart. It's no one side has political power. Gamergate was about cancel culture in a large way against feminists in the game industry.
I mean, everyone's gonna say like, I'm against cancel culture, but here's my political opponent, and here's some evidence that he might have raped someone, so let's get him fired. Everyone's gonna feel like that's just in the moment, right? But it probably isn't, especially if the evidence is not good. So, it's tough. It's one of those things where it's like, do you really want to have complete free speech? Because then you do get the Russian bot farms that, like you mentioned before. But I don't know.
I will say this.
There's this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I will say this about the whole thing. We're going to see a lot of people speaking out, rightly so, in my opinion. I want to be clear. This is good that they're speaking out against it. The people losing their jobs over pro-Palestinian stances in the coming months, right? We're going to see that happen over and over again on the left. And if we had not created the mechanisms to get people fired from their academia jobs for right-wing views, right? We would not be seeing this today, at least not at the numbers we are. So this is the thing. If we want to be able to say and speak out on controversial, important issues, we have to keep that shield strong when people we don't like, in fact may hate, come out and say things that we hate or oppose. And I think that keeping that shield strong to protect us all is going to be what gets us out of this mess. And we just have to return to our roots as a nation and say, I may not respect what you say, but I respect your right to say it. And I think we need to really cling to that again. Sorry, Dev, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I like free speech is my thing. Okay, this is what
that sounds really good, but I think there's probably some logistical problems in there. Because, for example,
we'll
if you
fight
have
you later on this, but go on.
Let's say you have two political parties, right? And the political power is being handed between them each election, and one political party is completely fine with censoring their opponents, and they don't even give a shit. The other political party says, you know what? No, free speech for everyone. We're all gonna play by the same rules. You end up in a position where every time the free speech party takes power, their opponents get to run wild with free speech. Every time the free speech party is on the outs, they get censored, and it becomes this one-way battle, right? So you almost have to have a standard of you're only going to censor the censors, in a sense.
But I think that censorship, right, in a real way, it's cutting off, it's getting short-term gains, absolutely. Short-term gains can be gained from it, absolutely. But in a very real way, I think it undercuts and undermines your own position. So while, yes, the one party who engages in censorship while the other doesn't, short-term, it's going to have a lot of success when it gets power to be able to censor and cut off its enemies. But I think at the end of the day, like, the good guys are good guys for a reason. It's because they don't do the things the bad guys do, right? And I know that's a simplistic way of looking at it, but I think most of my audience are simpletons, so we're gonna keep with the analogy here. I love my audience, but
Wick, this is where, like, respectfully,
I know we fight on this, but go on.
You're obviously a really smart guy, but let me give you a really concrete example of where I think it's just a little bit more complicated than I think you acknowledge. So here's a really good example. My good friend Carrie Goldbook's amazing book on this talks about some of her fights to try to get big tech to do things that are correct when it wasn't in their profit interest, right? She runs a really great law firm. And one really concrete example of this is someone was on Grindr, and they had a jilted former boyfriend who made a habit day after day after day after day of sending random strangers to his house to have sex with him. So he would be cooking dinner and somebody would be knocking on the door trying to have sex with him, right? Just did this constantly. She tried everything possible to try to get basically Grindr to expand their own terms of service and take action against this. They just would not do anything about this. Hold on, like the way you're talking about this, like that's a free speech issue. They're making their own account, right? So I think all of these things, if you really dig into the policy of like, what is the way 230 is implemented in this country? I want to keep 230, but I think the critics have some real fair points that deserve a policy answer. So I think the more you know about this subject, the more complicated all of it actually gets.
But that's the thing. The situation you described isn't speech, because speech, when I say free speech and absolute free speech, I'm thinking the ability to express ideas without censorship for that. What you're describing is something that is different, that I'm fine with. We have no, I have no compulsion or compunction with you engaging in mechanisms that shut that kind of behavior down, because it's a different style of thing. Now, it's like the heckler's veto, right? It's cutting the mic instead of allowing people to speak, and there's a substantive difference there. But I don't want to hog this conversation up. Poor Kilo ran away because we stopped talking to him. It's caller time, right? But if
actually,
you guys,
I have a question real quick.
Yeah, but if you guys want to, just real quick, if I may, if you guys want to read the best book I've ever read on free speech, Kindly Inquisitors. Look it up, check it out. It's great. I forget the author off the top of my head, but Kindly Inquisitors, you can Google it and find out. It's a very, very good treatise on why free speech matters and why it's important.
I wanted to ask this, but I forgot. I've remembered it. Was that the IKEA trans shark in the background as well?
Oh, me? Yeah. That's Wahash.
Okay. All right, yeah, okay. I figured. I thought it was, but I don't know. So I just wanted to confirm. Yeah.
So I had Blahash before Blahash was a trans icon. Believe it or not, there was an article that came out. I think it was back in 2017 about IKEA canceling the shark and a whole bunch of Russians getting angry about it. And I saw this story of it, and I was like, oh my God, that is the cutest thing I've ever seen. I've got to get that shark. And then, like, years later, Blahash became a huge trans icon. So I was in way before the trend.
All right.
Okay, you guys ready for the next caller?
Let's do it.
Okay. Speaking of trolling, Artemis Fowl, welcome.
Hi, Artemis. What's up?
You're live.
How's it going? Artemis.
Yes, I understand. I'm unmuting myself.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
How come you're not involved in the Project Zomboid server with Kibbs?
I have a job that is very important that makes a lot of money. Do you think I have time to play in the middle of the day when everybody else is supposed to be at work?
Well, that is our job. Sorry.
Yeah. So I do have a question for everybody here. So the right, back in the day, in the 90s, was pearl clutching about evil Satanists and stuff like this, and doing the slippery slope argument of they're going to destroy everything, or it's the end times that the left gets what they want, right? Now, seeing how far the left has gone in terms of its policies and enacting them, would we say more or less that the right was correct in that where it was heading, or is it not? Because for my example, C.S. Lewis talks about the moral tyrant, right, that never sleeps, whereas the Republicans are evil in a lot of aspects, but at least at some point they stop messing with you. They have. So, go ahead. I mean,
we'll finish your question, then we'll respond. I promise.
Was the right correct about the slippery slope of the left? Because from what everybody can see in the last 10 years, the slippery slope is no longer a fallacy, but just an inevitability at this point.
Can I help you with an example?
Go ahead,
Artemis. So I don't think I agree with you, but I think I know what you're getting at. Okay, so there was definitely this idea back when it was gay marriage was being debated, is that if we allow gay marriage, they're going to be having sex with animals, they're going to be having sex with children, they're going to be doing all this weird shit. And that was the right wing argument. And everyone back then, kind of rolled their eyes and said, okay, grandma, like this is obviously stupid, right? And now you have a lot of right-wing accounts online that are promoting instances, and they, in my opinion, they're isolated instances, but they are bad instances of, let's say, trans people doing weird things with children. And I think, even though I think it's a minority of instances, it's enough, and it's been amplified enough that right-wingers are currently saying, we were right the whole time. Is that what you're getting at, basically?
Well, the right wingers will say that, but I'm just saying, can anybody see the argument there?
I can see the argument, but I don't think I agree with it necessarily.
I think both sides have, slid more and more and more into extremes, and I think probably one of the failures, as I've engaged this tonight, I think we haven't acknowledged how crazy the Republicans are now. Some absurdly high number of Republicans nowadays don't even believe in democracy. When Mitt Romney, that's not my opinion, that's Mitt Romney's opinion when he resigned from the Senate, right? So I'm not going to tell you that the hyperbole of my own side does not go to crazy town. It does. It absolutely does. But I don't think that issue is limited to one side. I'm not gonna tell you who, but it was a pretty famous person on the right. And I was talking to this person the other day. They were telling me how with their algorithm, when they go onto Instagram, it's like recipe of how to make a bomb, like recipe on how to like create your own like flammables for a riot, right? Like it's this constant deluge of stuff to literally bring out an insurrection, right? And just how stunning they feel about how their own side is behaving. So like I think, Dev, I know you have a really good video criticizing this word reactionary, and I know I'm misusing it according to your definition here, but I do think that all of us are coming just so emotionally charged in the way we respond to each other. It's leading to some really crazy stuff.
What about you, Wick?
Well, I talk a lot about on my channel about reciprocal radicalization and how both sides have driven, as Brianna Wu said, each other into more and more extremes because they have to fight the other side. So when you talk about like, was the right correct that the left was going to go this direction? Yes and no, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because they have created this monster. They are responsible for this monster in a lot of ways. And I don't think they can solely take blame, obviously, right? I think the left has autonomy. But at the end of the day, there is a party of sanity still, and I'd say it's squarely on in most issues the Democrats. Republicans, I don't want to like, I have a large Republican audience, right? They are not crazy. They're sane, but their leadership and a lot of the policy positions that have been pushed by some of these people are out of this world. Now, that isn't to say that the left doesn't also have crazy policies that they pass or push, right? Like this idea that they're going to remove standards for 8th graders on math,
Oregon and Washington,
and things like that, right? It's again,
well, it's for a very specific group of people.
Sure, yeah, but it's a tit for tat. Right? It's a tit for tat. We have to go hard because if we don't go hard, they're going to go hard. Like Manchin has decided not to run again because he's gotten this man, Joe Manchin, I'm going to stand him for a little bit, right? He got a huge win for American Energy Pass. He also was, again, an important seat. He voted progressive, 90% of the time? But because he didn't vote for it 100%, he got crucified. And that's not going to make the next replacement be less radical, right? Or it's not going to...
I don't think that's the argument against Joe Manchin.
I think the issue is that most people in the left think of him as a blue dog and a Republican in all but name.
No, it's the corruption. It's the outright corruption.
Oh, you're talking about his daughter in the medical industry?
Well, I think that, like ruling on issues of like basically the use of fossil fuels and sabotaging bills while he's actually owning one of those companies, I think that's pretty outright corruption.
Do you
right?
think that no? But do you think, Brianna? Come on, you don't think that when the left criticizes Manchin, that's not what they're criticizing? At least that's not what I see. That's not the
No,
criticism
there's
I
certainly
hear.
a portion of the left that does that, but like we are a political party, and when one person is sabotaging, our president's efforts to get certain legislation passed, I think he should expect blowback. I mean, Manchin
Sure.
certainly gets this. I mean, this
But-
is democracy functioning.
But
in my view.
Manchin's replace, like we have, okay.
No, this is where I agree with Matt Iglesias, right? He talks about how Manchin isn't the problem; it's that we need a lot more Manchins. And hold on before progressive Twitter crucifies me. The problem is the Senate is, like, as a structure, is fundamentally stacked against the Democrats. It always will be. This is the reason we have a bicameral system in the first place in this country, is because they knew that they wanted to have continue slavery, and they knew that if you leave these issues up to just the popular will of the people, there are a lot of powerful interests that are going to be crushed. The Senate is fundamentally stacked in favor of the Republicans. So if you have more moderate people out there that we're growing to be able to win some of these states that are more conservative leaning, like West Virginia, that will over time give Democrats more power. And I agree with that.
Hold on. There's definitely better arguments for the existence of the Senate as it currently stands than that, though.
Yeah,
Like, it serves a good function.
Yeah, the Senate is there to tampen expectations on like situations of high intense fervor from passing through the lower house, the house, and then that's the whole point, is just for change incrementally, so that people don't go insane and start a war that destroys the nation. That's the whole point of the Senate, and to provide some type of check and balances against large population centers.
Look, I am an institutionalist at my core. I don't have a big problem with the Senate. I'm talking about a strategy about how the Democrats can get more power. If Manchin stepping down, we don't have candidates on deck that are moderate that can win in West Virginia. So I would love, don't get me wrong, I'm a pro-abortion, pro-feminist, progressive. But I think if we are interested in keeping the Senate, it makes sense to have candidates on deck on those states that we can run and win and get political power for ourselves.
So I got a question on the Ohio thing.
Oh, one last question, but we do have a line. So yeah, one last and we'll get you.
So why do you think that the Ohio abortion thing is a knock against Republicans?
What do you mean?
Because Republicans are staunchly about letting states decide abortion rather than allowing the overall federal government to make a sweeping judgment on it.
I think that it is going to be terrible. Look, if you want to make this an abortion question, it's going to take a whole hour. So
not about the abortion, but about the allowing the individual state to decide their own policies.
It's terrible for women's public health. This is a right. Men would never allow a law like this to be passed about their own bodies. It is leading to terrible outcomes, and it's horrible top to bottom. So I do not support that in any way.
I mean, that's fair. I was just going to say that argument would have had valid before 2020 and the COVID lockdown, but that COVID lockdown destroyed that argument because nobody cared about self choice when it comes to medical procedures during that time. So
this might be its own thing.
No, that's fine.
Val, you know me. You
thank you.
Me.
Thank you for your
we can set
thank you
something
for your statement on that. I just wanted to know, but thank you.
All good. And Val, thank you for coming on, and thank you for the super chats.
So here's the thing. Considering what I know about Artemis's job, I know that he's a glowy. If you know what that means.
He's a
he actually is a glowy. Yeah.
Okay.
That would actually be an interesting conversation, you and him, because you probably both know way more about the American government than I do.
Sure.
So because he actually does work in it. To some, I can't talk about how, but he does. He has.
Sure.
Are you doxing this guy? Is this public knowledge?
No, I am not.
Okay. I just don't want you Artemis Fowl. I know that guy. Here's his address and name, and
he has overthrown several South American dictatorships.
I mean, I'm not anti-law enforcement kind of gal. I mean, I've worked with the FBI on multiple occasions on multiple projects at this point. When my congressional campaign was hacked by Russia, they stepped in. I was really impressed by the skill of their cybersecurity team. I think it's really important for national security, right? So
Was it actually hacked by Russia?
Yeah.
How do you know that?
Because I can't get into it, but I do know this.
Okay.
There are news stories about it. Go read them.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay.
Yep.
Next caller. SFO-CIAL, hello.
SFO-CIAL?
SFO-CIAL. Oh, there he goes.
Oh, well, he's gone.
Don't click the join voice button. Don't click it. I'm sorry, Discord silly. Unmute yourself and go. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Dev, when did Gamergate actually start? Was it like PAX 2014? Was it a week before when Adam Baldwin tweeted about Gamergate? Or was it long before then? Oh, boy.
Why are you a shark?
I figured I'd telegraph my position and trigger you a little bit.
Oh, geez. When did it start? I don't fucking know, dude. Does it
What
matter
was
at
it
this
when
point?
Adam Baldwin tweeted Gamergate? Was that because that was like it didn't have a
No.
name? Was it
No.
a nameless movement
mean,
before then, or
It was
or
like
did it start?
it was the same movement, but it was
Okay.
nameless before then. Yeah, but it was the
Okay,
same movement.
great.
Yeah.
So we've got a narrative that's coming from the author of the Gamergate book that you had to be a time traveler to do everything that has been attributed to Gamergate, and this kind of debunks that. So if it was a movement before Adam Baldwin, then that narrative doesn't play out, and I want to make sure that we're honest about that.
Yeah.
So
All right.
when
Sure.
what was sort of this the incentive, the spark
When
that
did it
set
start?
off? Yeah.
It
What was the
must have
spark?
been it was the Zoe post, right?
Okay,
Posting
so
Zoe
no,
post?
well, but then
I
you're saying
don't agree with that, by the way. I think
it was
started before
Adam
then.
Baldwin and all that.
That's when we got the name. In my view, I think Zoe is incorrectly credited as the catalyst for Gamergate. I actually think it started with Anita Sarkeesian before then, and Feminist Frequency Gang founded, because right after that, what is not historically recognized is how that playbook immediately started bleeding over into the personal lives of women in the game industry. They've been talking about equality. So, yeah, I think that's when it started.
I can only tell you what I remember. I remember, hanging out in 4chan, and Anita was making videos, and everyone was shitting on her, and so these are bad videos. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's not a real gamer. All that was happening, but I don't remember any sort of like consistent, united fervor until the Zoe post dropped, and then until like the next day or two, when you had a bunch of those gamers are dead articles drop. That's when I remember specifically everyone coming together to be like, "There's something wrong here."
Yeah. So from
hold on just 1 second, because
Yeah.
I lived this. There's an article I wrote just before all of that stuff happened. It's called "No Skin is Thick Enough" for Polygon. I was told at the time that it was the third most read piece for that year. And this was before the Zoe post. It was talking about the horror and shit show that was happening to women in the game industry. Starting with Samantha Allen, basically quitting the entire game industry because of the doxing and harassment that she got. That has just been erased from all of this. So I hear you and I believe you when you say that you weren't really aware of that, but women in the game industry were. It was really, really bad for us.
$2 to tell SFO-CIAL to put the shark back, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll get your $2 back later. But basically, if from my perspective, being in a different part of the games industry, there were conversations around how do we expand the customer base? How do we get away from the toxic Xbox Call of Duty crowd?
Yes.
And this is where the gamers are dead sentiment was developed. I know that we had like the journo list conspiracy, which was kind of proven. And I've seen like different groups of people in media gather in private messages, but then of course we also had similar things happen political organizing in 2016. So we no one's innocent here from from like this collusion back channels, but it certainly did sort of like this overall position of the industry pushing for expanded customer base, dismantling the aggression, like Dick Wolf's episode, and all of this was pressing on industry to perform its image. And I think that's why, even if it was coordinated behind the scenes, that's why we did have sentiment redefine gamers somehow.
And just one more word on this, because I have nothing new to say on Gamergate, but just to tackle what you're talking about, people miss this historic part of the industry because this was when mobile started eating the lunch of AAA studios. Before Gamergate, one of this bad game that I still enjoy, it's called Alpha Protocol. It's a Mass Effect clone. It was made by Sega. I think the budget was like $20 million or something. This was this B-tier game that the game industry was able to produce just a few years before Gamergate. But mobile started changing it so much that we were looking for new audiences. And we were realizing we couldn't keep talking to the exact same kind of people making these same kind of games because development was getting more expensive. Audiences were looking for something new. So like a lot of this stuff that got the core gamers so angry, I don't want to sound like a communist, but it was capitalism, right? It was this force in the game industry to like find new people to buy your stuff.
I mean, that's true to an extent. This is something I'm trying to work out in my head. Oh God, and it's much more complicated for this conversation. Capitalism and communism don't really operate in the kind of dichotomy that most people think that it does. Because
Wait, is your
capitalism and
answer to this
communism.
question capitalism is okay? Fair enough. Go ahead.
Well, they both have like universalizing forces within them, right? Because capitalism wants to, as you said, increase a consumer base. In order to do that, you need to appeal to a whole bunch of different demographics with different tastes, which means you're gonna get yours too.
I don't have one. This is not fair. But go on.
So basically, as you increase your install base for a product, that means you have to start appealing to different types of people who all have different ideas about what they want to buy, which means that some sort of universalization of what you're offering, right? It has to be acceptable to 10 different types of people, all with 10 different sensibilities, which necessarily leads to some sort of watering down. So capitalism has this universalizing effect, but communism also has a universalizing effect, and they're kind of like twins in that regard. This is something that I don't fully understand yet. I'm still trying to work it out in my head. But I think like there is something corrosive to small communities, whether they be online communities or even real life communities like small towns, that capitalism brings into the equation that socialism or communism cannot actually solve. It only exacerbates. And I don't know what to do about it. I don't quite know how to formulate this idea
Very
yet, but I'm still thinking
vague,
about it.
I will say, and also I
Yeah.
can tell why some people might say that you're a subversive communist infiltrating right-wing spaces.
Oh,
with
okay,
that
yeah,
answer.
probably, yeah.
Anything else before we let you go, Soyata?
Yeah, that kind of ironically, what Dev said kind of ironically goes into why I think the left is so bad on Palestine right now, because they are identity opportunists rather than being on mission. And on mission would mean dismantling structures of oppression. This is,
Yes.
yeah, in somewhat relating to what Dev's saying is that, okay, so bland market consumer level, Twitch subscriber level socialism doesn't solve it, because that's all about land back and, all of these groups of people are good and we should support them, rather than we need to smash gender hierarchy. And that's what being a leftist is about.
Well, Soyata, thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for the blahaj. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But see you later, Soyata.
I love Blahaj.
Blahaj?
His
Is that how you
Blahaj
say it?
looks
I
very
don't
new.
know.
I
I've
don't
seen
know.
it, obviously.
I could be mispronouncing it. His looks so new. He's new on the Blahaj train. I've been here for years.
Okay.
Oh God, $5 from Artemis. Dev was picking me weak for caving to online harassment. He wants me to. I'll just say yes. Fuck you. This is like a meme in my community.
Okay. I'm not
okay.
familiar, but okay. Fair enough. Don't cave to the harassers, gang. It only makes them stronger. Never apologize. That's not true. You should apologize if you do something wrong. But there is the crowd doesn't want you to say sorry. It wants your blood, right? And it will.
So here's the thing, like,
yeah.
I'm sure I've never experienced anything as bad as you have during Gamergate, Brianna. But I've been harassed on the internet as well. You know,
Yeah,
if you have
I've seen it.
if you have a channel of any sort of size, you get harassed for something somewhere, right? And the lesson I've learned is just never back down, never apologize if you think you're right. And it's a hard lesson to learn for sure, but it's definitely served me well over the years. Where it's like, no, I actually think that I'm correct about this, and I don't care if there's 1,000 people who want my head. I'm not going to give in.
I think there's some quality, some psychology of you that I haven't quite figured out yet, where you mention a lot. Like there's like 5 or 6 videos about how you don't have trolls remorse. And I don't mean to put you on the psychologist's couch, but I think there's some part of you where your identity of yourself and the way you perceive yourself is based in this kind of the edgy chats you were having back in the 2000s. And
I still have them, don't worry.
And I think it affects your analysis of things in a way that doesn't help you get to the right answers always.
Maybe. I think it's just that you can always it never hurts to have a greater constitution, you know?
Sure.
And that's kind of how I viewed things like that.
Okay, let's bring we got a few more that I want to get through on the callers, gang. I know that I want to respect your time as well.
I'm just about done.
Yeah, I know. So we'll get through the current crop. I'll make sure that they are in a timely manner, and then we'll close it out. Let's get them in. Hello, you're live. You got a question or a comment, I suppose.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can. What's up?
Hello. This is one of my viewers. What's up, dude?
Hello. I was just wondering, do you think horseshoe theory is correct?
Me or Brianna?
Rihanna.
I'm getting sold on it. I'm
Uh,
starting to think it's right.
another one is, do you guys think government should break up monopolies, like intervene?
I
Depends,
think
really.
one
Depends.
of the things that makes America different than China is if you look at the ascendance of something like ByteDance, China and the PRC are just synonymous with ByteDance. Anyone that tells you they're not is just lying to you outright. And I do think that a good thing about this country is America tends to be a little bit more laissez-faire in picking winners and losers. So I think that I actually really agree with Elizabeth Warren that when it comes to some of these really, really big companies in the tech space, though, we're really limiting innovation because no one else can operate in the space. They get either bought up immediately or just crushed, or a company like Facebook will just come in and dominate them by stealing their features. So I think in general, over my lifetime, the government has gotten less willing to use their power to break up monopolies. But I also think it needs to be done extremely, extremely thoughtfully. Because it's not always bad. A really good example is, in the game industry, we've seen a move towards the model of things like Games Pass, right? Where Microsoft or Sony will actually own the studio and then will fund direct development of these kind of B-tier games. This is good in some ways, and it sustains a lot of smaller development studios, but also leads to, more vertical integration in the game industry. So I don't think it's like either or. I think that it's, I think we need to look at these situations, but I think overall we've not used that power enough.
Okay. Did you get your questions answered, sir?
I got one more.
One more, quickly.
Hey, Dev, what's
Yeah?
that font you use in your videos?
The old one was called Handy Sans, but in order for me to start using it legally, it was going to cost you like $10,000 fucking dollars.
Jesus.
Damn.
So I switched over to Atma, and I use Atma Bold.
All
You
right.
can find that. You can find that for free on Google Fonts.
Okay. Thanks
All
for
right,
coming
thank
in
you.
again.
Those are my questions. All right, bye.
See
Go
ya.
to blambot.com. I've used them for my professional design work for years. Their
Okay.
licensing fees are very, very reasonable.
Fair enough.
Awesome. Awesome.
Well, let's bring it
I
in.
guess real quick regarding his horseshoe theory question. The more I'll be very quick. I'm sorry.
No, it's not. I
Basic.
mean, like we could
Oh,
like look. We could talk all night if you want.
This is
I
a
just
good
know Brianna has to
conversation.
go.
I'm
So
enjoying
yeah.
this.
okay.
Yeah.
Basically, like the more that I've been reading political theory, the more that I've been convinced by horseshoe theory, because
Yeah.
I keep finding like these 1920s and 1930s socialists who are writing like fascists, and I'm like, how did this come about? Why is there this link between these two ideologies? And the more I read, the more that I'm like, okay, there's like a pipeline here or something. Something has to be going on here, and it's been like obscured in the modern era because nobody reads political theory anymore. But something's going on.
Yeah.
I would on this. I don't know if policy wise it holds up horseshoe theory, but I know behavior wise it absolutely does. The further you go to the extremes, the more willing they are to engage in certain types of behaviors that if you go away from those extremes are seen as unacceptable. So in that way, I think horseshoe theory is a circle, honestly. The more extreme fringes of certain beliefs are willing to any means necessary it. No bad tactics, just bad targets. And we can see
Yep.
that on both sides, and it is a problem. It
Absolutely.
is something that we need to get away from immediately. But yeah, that's my thought. You guys ready for the next call?
I agree. Let's do it.
Real quick. Artemis Fowl, $2. Ask Dev how he lost his license. He wants to reveal all of my deep lore.
Okay,
right now.
he's gonna
You
have to
lost
if he
your
wants to
license?
interrupt and things like that. That's cool. We like your
You
money,
mean driver's license?
but
When I was like 21, I'm not 21 anymore, and I'm fine now. Okay, but way back in the day, I drove a dump truck for the city of Toronto. I work for the municipality, and
Awesome.
I was driving around with the back up because I forgot I had dumped a load and I forgot to put the bed down. So I was driving down the street with the bed up, and I went right through an intersection and took down all the power lines, and the city was without power for a little while. So I was like, you know what? I lost my license. I got demoted. I was back down to picking up garbage for the city again, and it was a rough time for me for a while.
So I will tell you a quick story about driving a dump truck myself. So in Mississippi, there's very, very little to do. But one of my best friends growing up, his grandfather had basically this pit in the middle of the woods, and they were out there, chopping down the trees, like basically chopping down the forest to make a bunch of money from it, right? So I actually learned how to pick locks in high school so we could then open the gate and go into the sand pit. And this is the same year that I learned how to make fake IDs. So I was the only person in my high school class that could actually get us alcohol, and I did. So we would go out there and throw these huge parties in this bonfire pit, and a bunch of 16-year-olds getting drunk out of our mind and driving the wrecking ball around, driving the dump truck around while students are in the back passed out out of their mind, like going, and like cranes, bulldozers, all this stuff. I actually know how to operate all of that equipment because of the extremely illegal stuff I was doing back then.
All right.
I disavow
Nice.
all illegal activities. I wag my finger. Okay. Let's
Is the
get
statute of limitations passed on that, or
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
good because people will sit on it and try to use it. Well, anyway.
I've told this story many times.
President Sunday's watching. He might.
True. Go ahead. New caller. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. My stream things up. Hi, you're live.
Hey.
Cryborn.
Yeah, it's Cryborn.
Oh, Cryborn. I know Cryborn. One of my
Yeah.
community members. Hello.
So, Brianna, I was hoping you could kind of remind people what's at stake should Republicans win in 2024, and why the left-wing infighting is so dangerous.
Thank you for such a great question. Trump is an existential threat to democracy, and He's certainly going to abuse his power to basically get revenge on his enemies and stop the rule of law from being implemented against him. He has nothing to lose. He's looking at prison time. So, Trump himself is this existential threat to democracy. Additionally, if you look at the fringe rightward tilt of the court, I think one of the worst things that could happen is Trump appointing even more judges to the judiciary. So it's really not an exaggeration to say if we don't get our shit together and work on winning 2024, I genuinely am not sure we're still going to have a country.
Damn.
Actually, I have a question for you.
No.
Sure.
I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Do you think that Trump genuinely believes that he won 2020 and he's just wrong about it? Or do you think that he knows he lost and he's just been coping?
I don't have to surmise about this because it's all come out in the cases against him, where he's admitted in private. People have testified how he knows he lost. And it was him just trying to keep power. So don't take my word for it. Take it from the people that were there.
If you have those, could you send them to me? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, it's very easily found, but I will do that after the show.
Okay, great.
Cool. Wow.
Thank you.
Getting some information answered. Well, thanks for being here, Cryborn. Cryborn, you know I love you, right?
Love you too, Wick.
Bye-bye. Parasocially.
Everybody always has these
platonically.
cool streamer nicknames. I've been thinking so much. I'm just BRIANNA, right? We got Wick.
You're the woo effect, right? We can
The woo
work on
effect?
the woo effect.
What should mine be? Like, I don't know.
Actually, woo effect is not bad.
Woo's Warriors. That could be your community name, right?
Woo
the Woo
fast,
Warriors.
woo furious.
Woo, that works too. I like it. Woo, right? We could do that. If you
there you
that
go.
direction.
Okay. I'm probably gonna be changing my name sometime soon. I mean,
it's not a great name. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Everyone knows.
It's not. It's not. Is it a Metal Gear reference? What? I've looked at that so many times. I'm like, what the hell?
So I started the channel in 2009 when it was like me and my friends kind of running around my small town with a camera, and we were shooting anime content, and the name just stuck from when I was younger. It just stuck around. So like, yeah, 2009, that was the era of like Channel Awesome on the internet, right? This was long before a lot of the nonsense we're facing now. So we were like, we're gonna be anime reviewers and we're gonna make it onto Doug Walker's website, and that was like our big dream. And it didn't work out, but actually, I have like a bit of deep lore on that. For anybody who cares about fucking Channel Awesome lore from 15 years ago, after the channel got bigger, we ended up applying again, and they took us, and then I rejected it because I just wanted to see that I could. So I was like,
spiteful. Okay.
Spiteful.
Oof.
One victory.
I have way overthought this. That I've thought for years, because your voice is you've got you could be a voice actor, a professional voice actor. You're really good at that, right? And there's such a disconnect between like short fat otaku and your voice. So I'm like, is this an ironic commentary? Is this? And I find out it's one of these situations like when you're playing somebody online and their username is like boobs are awesome, and you're like, okay, they were 14 when they made that username.
That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
We got two more callers. I want to be real quick with them, and then we're gonna let Woo off the leash here and get her out of here. But let's bring them on. Hello, friend. While we wait for him, 10 more bucks from Artemis Fowl. If the left's message about Trump being an existential threat is as important as you think it is, why is Trump gaining support across the board, including 22% of African Americans now? We'll answer that question later. But I would say it's simply the fact that people are tired of they view the economy as doing poorly, whether or not it is. That's how they view the economy, and I think that's just driving things, right?
I agree.
Okay. Okay, you're here. Great. Excellent. What's up? You're live.
Hey, so first off, since people already know I'm in the military, so any statements I make are personal opinions, not reflected in the Department of Defense or the Army, anything like that. Got to do it.
Which branch do you serve in?
I'm in the Army, officer.
Thank
infantry.
you very much for that.
No,
thank officer, though? Oh, well.
You guys are working.
I wish we had someone who worked for a living on, but go ahead.
Okay, so I'll ask just one short question. So I'm a big fan of Jonathan Haidt, Rider and Elephant kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
what do you guys do to actually check your policies and social prescriptions that you support to make sure it's not the elephant in charge?
Can I
Was
answer
the elephant in
this?
charge? Can you help me understand that?
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so the basic idea is most people are not as rational as they think they are. You're primarily controlled by instincts and emotion, which is kind of like an elephant. And then your rational mind is the person riding on top of the elephant. The rider thinks they're in control, but the elephant just kind of does what it does. And you post hoc rationalize afterwards.
I'll answer this question first, if I may, and then I'll let the stars of the show go. But one of the things that I personally do to make sure that I am checking my biases, making sure I'm not just knee jerking, is building a community like this, where most of my community yells at me all the time, right? Where I'm constantly challenged. I am in a space where I have other elephants to check my elephant, if that makes sense, right? Where I am challenged and we normalize being able to come to me directly and say, Wick, you're being stupid, you're being wrong, you're being irrational. That's what it's not perfect, but that's my go-to. Anyway.
I think for
So
me, I mean, earlier in the show, I talked about how reactionary I was during Gamergate, speaking of trauma, right? So I think that's a really good example of where I failed. I can't think of any situation where I got really, really angry and posted a tweet response to that it worked out well. And I think part of the good part of getting older is you learn to don't react that emotionally as often. I clearly fail at this all the time. My passion is just a part of my personality. It's probably never going to go away. But I think you try to surround yourself with people that you really value their counsel. Something I think that has really been good at helping me get the right answer. Dev, I think it's clear from this conversation tonight that I genuinely watch your YouTube channel, even though I've had many criticisms of parts of that tonight, right? I do spend a lot of time watching content I don't agree with because I do think it helps me make sure that my opinions are correct. And yeah, there's some stuff you've said that I've changed my mind on, and I've admitted as much. But yeah, I think that that ability to hear another side is really, really important.
I guess the way I view it is when it comes to. Oh, thanks by the way. I do appreciate the fluffing. When
It's
it
not
comes
fluff,
to
it's genuine.
when it comes to the elephant and the rider, when Jonathan Haidt lays out that example, what he's basically saying is that if the elephant is calm, the rider is capable of directing the elephant in the general direction that the rider wants to go. But if the elephant is agitated, the rider has no hope, right? And the best way you can do that is you can make the road as clear as possible. So, a lot of the things that you can do to help along your own rationality is to, before you get into any sort of heated debate, before you ever actually have to use those precious cycles of brain power, which are quite limited per day, make sure that like your environment is set, make sure that your house is in order, make sure your ideas are in order, make sure that you've studied, you've read, make sure that you considered other things before you have to be tested on them, right? That's probably the best way that you can avoid, that is the best way you can avoid saying something stupid.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough. And before I head off, I will recommend to Brianna that you should absolutely read The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt.
Yes.
Feel
So
free
just for
to, yeah. What is the name of this? Righteous Mind? Tell me about this.
The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. That is
Great book.
basically his
Yeah.
his magnum opus. It's the psychology of morality. It's the 6 moral foundations we talked about earlier. That is the book.
And it is free on Audible. I'm buying it right now. Boom.
you won't regret it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I can ask, what do you do in the Army?
Yeah, so I'm just an infantry officer, so I'm not going to go into my specific job, but I've done things from platoon leader, company officership, S3 in the shop time, so just kind of all different kinds of jobs.
Yeah.
Just
Are,
generally, my branch is infantry.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's
Appreciate that.
Veterans Day
No,
tomorrow,
thank you guys
gang,
for
ain't
the
it?
support.
Right? I think it is.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
we're doing free Applebee's or something tomorrow with the
Yeah.
family.
But yeah, again, thanks for calling. Thanks for coming by, and we'll see you later, buddy. Bye.
No, thanks for having me on.
Officers. I was an enlisted. It's a little bit of a different world, but it was fun.
Yeah, we don't have Veterans Day here, but we have Remembrance Day, and it's pretty much the same thing. Do Americans have the tradition of wearing poppies for it, or no?
No.
I've never heard of that.
No.
What
we
we
pretty
do
much
is
we put a support the troops sticker on our car and then send them off for war and then give them no health care.
Fireworks and barbecues.
Fireworks.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
listen, if you're ever in Canada or the UK or in Australia or New Zealand, there's a tradition where on November 11th, which is Remembrance Day in these countries, everyone wears a poppy on their shirt. And you can generally buy a poppy for like 25 cents at any store, and all that money goes towards the military.
Oh, that's a good idea.
For like veteran stuff, yeah.
One last caller. I'm sorry, there's 2 things, but one came in a little late. Sorry. Let's get Infallible Foul. Infallible Foul, you're live. You're on air.
What is up? I was wondering about something you guys were talking about a little bit earlier. And maybe that's a little bit of bias that I have just because I'm not seeing this from a right-wing perspective. But when I feel like when people talk about the right and they talk about usually the individual, like this person did this wrong, this person did that. But I've been hearing a lot, especially in this space around here, is the left progressives have an anti-Semitic problem. I've been seeing, earlier you said horseshoe theory. Now, what is it do you think about having maybe like a little bit more fiscally liberal policies would make somebody more of a scumbag and have more of a far-right extremist opinion in life?
I don't.
Well, that was apparently like we were talking horseshoe theory.
Wait, what do you mean? I don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Rephrase, sir, if you can.
Oh, Wick, you were talking about horseshoe theory. You had a title up that said
I think the left has an anti-Semitism problem that is not willing. So when we say the left, right, it's not just, oh, I'm a leftist because I believe in these fiscal policies and things like that. The left, as a term, covers a broad tent of belief structures and things like that. And this is by design, so that we can coalesce and do this kind of like cooperative action, this community action in order to get things passed. So we put aside our differences in order to come together to fight against the things that we think are bad and to promote the things that we think are good. My whole thing that I have observed of late, after October 7th especially, is how many people are willing to overlook anti-Semitism because they believe in the oppressor versus the oppressed kind of dynamic going on in the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And they don't just keep their criticism towards the Israeli state, but they, again, talk in the most extreme terms and are willing to put up with, again, just dehumanizing Jewish individuals in order to, because they hate Israel so much, they're willing to overlook anti-Semitism. And that's a problem, and we need to address that. That's my...
I just think there is a large part of the audience that does feel like it was kind of generalized, and a lot of them were frustrated with you. And I think that's
fair to be frustrated, but I'm frustrated with them right back because, again, I am not saying that everyone on the left is anti-Semitic. Obviously not. But if we can't pretend that there's none. And when people bring it up, you can't get mad at it. We have to clean our own house. We have to keep it in order. We cannot let the cancer spread. We saw what happened to the right when the right let its crazies take over and dictate and become the elephant that drove the rider. We cannot let that happen. And so we must push back, excise, and get rid of the people who are a cancer in our party and in our movements. And there are many, many, many that I think are mask on amongst us, but for a brief moment on October 7th they dropped their mask, and we saw this with not only online activity with people asking like, what do you think decolonization looks like? And gang, every time I hear decolonize, that is as a term tainted for me forever.
Yeah.
Right? I will never hear decolonization said in a way that doesn't make me think, oh, that's what they mean. Right?
That was ugly.
Okay, so if I can take a swing at that, I hear what you're saying, Wick. So if you are a traditional Republican that wants low taxes and little government regulation, maybe even you have some questions about what our school board policy should be and how much we're talking about like same-sex marriage, stuff like that. That to me is just bread and butter, normie Republican stuff. I don't have any issue with that. I want to beat you at the ballot box. I don't agree with you, but I think that is democracy. These are some stats. This is according to the University of Washington. So this is from MAGA supporters. And the percentage of MAGA supporters, according to the University of Washington, that supported Trump's election fraud claims was almost 98%. The number of MAGA supporters that distrust the 2020 presidential election results was 97%. The number of MAGA people that believe voting shouldn't be easier is over 90%. Distrust the 2020 congressional results is almost 80%. So over and over and over again, I think you're seeing this more on the right. It certainly exists on the left, but there's a strain on the right of fundamentally not believing in democracy, not believing in the rule of law, and seeing the opposition as an enemy in a way that you truly want to see them destroyed. Not just beating them at the ballot box, but you think they're so evil that you just want to, this is why you see the national divorce and talk of the second civil war from the right. So, and what really worries me is I see the same sentiment growing on the left. Part of why I'm taking this blow, professionally in calling it out, is I don't want the left to become a mirror of the right. I think that would be a really dark fate for the country.
Any thoughts on this, SFO? I know it's you're the opposition here, but go ahead.
Well, I mean,
you characterized him as a rightoid now. Look at that.
I guess I'm
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
No, Rick just did.
Yeah, because it's funny. But go ahead.
So here's the thing, right? I don't remember what it was, but there was definitely something that made me feel over 10 years ago what basically you're feeling right now, Brianna.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, there is actually some dark evil underneath all of the good rhetoric of the left, and there is actually some serious problems here. And I think anyone who ever went through that I'm leaving the left or I've been abandoned by the left arc, which you hear, like Tim Pool says that about himself. I think Shoe on Head might say it about herself, maybe.
Yeah.
There's been a bunch of people online who have said that. I think a lot of that is, it's not that the left has left anyone behind. It's a realization that, not in terms of policy, because policy is different from location to location. In terms of philosophy, the left actually is not morally superior to the right. And when that comes out, people are kind of stunned. They're like, oh, okay. And then they have to go through like a moment of awakening, I think.
I don't know if it's, I don't think I've ever thought we were morally, I mean, you gotta understand, because of my unique background, when I think about Republicans, I do think about all the people I know back down home in Mississippi, right? They're good people, they go to church, they are living in a society that is still very much bearing the weight, this open wound of segregation and the Civil War has been largely forgotten by the rest of the country. I think they are racist in ways they don't understand. I think their policies are wrong, and I think we need to denounce that. But are they fundamentally evil people and I'm a good person? I've never thought that's true, right? I think people are people, and I think the more time you spend actually going out and doing politics in the real world, you'll see there's I've never talked to anyone I couldn't find something that I liked something about them, right? So I don't know, I've just never seen it in that moral black and white.
And I think that's why what's happening to you right now is happening. Because I've definitely met leftists, both online and off, who thought that they were just superior for their beliefs.
Yep. Well,
that is a thing, and it does speak to horseshoe theory. But Look, I've been
I
going
don't.
off on this for a while now on my show. I know people are probably tired about it, but I think it's very, very important that we have to recognize our own internal issues, because if we don't, it's going to be a problem. And it's hard. I know it's hard. It's hard to recognize that the people you thought were on your side are probably not on your side, really. Um, and yeah, it's just a struggle we're going through right now.
I actually want to amend what I said. It's not only that they think that they're superior, it's that even in their superiority, if it were real, they have no humility about it. And that's really the killer, because sometimes you do just have a better idea, right? But you have to be humble in victory. And I think that's something the left has a problem with.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's why you see a lot of this rhetoric where, like, I've been called a genocide supporter more times today than I can even count, even though I'm very strongly pro-Palestine. I've said many times, like, we need to stop civilian death there, right? So I certainly understand that tendency to really moralize things really, really quickly. So.
Okay. Infallible Al, thank you for calling in. Any last comment? Any last words, comrade, before we send you to the void?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I think that a little bit that you have to think about, because I think you look at it from a moderate perspective, and you think moderates are the good ones, and there's
No.
bad people from all sides. You're gonna run into some
Moderation
bad
and
and good
all
people.
moderates. There's times to be radical and extreme, and there's time to be moderate, and you have to be able to recognize which is which. I do think that moderates tend to do less harm overall, simply by dint of their style of engaging with things, but that doesn't mean that they're right. And I'm not, like, people call me like a centrist, but I'm not. I'm solidly progressive, right? I'm solidly left leaning. I'm not 100% left leaning, but I'm pretty close. I do really think that extremism is way worse than moderation, though, in most cases.
I think I could set myself a little bit further left, but I call out people on the left to do shit that
Cool.
I don't agree with too.
Well, then
So, I mean,
when they're celebrating Hamas in the streets, I think you should call that out, brother. Thank you for coming on, Foul, and we'll see you later. Okay, I know that you have to go, Will, so I'm going to give you the mic to tell people.
Is it time?
Who you are?
I mean, it's 9:20. It's a 3-hour and 20-minute show.
I mean,
so.
I'm down for. I got to read a couple more super chats here, so I'll be
Go ahead
on
and
for a little bit longer.
Take your time. Take your time.
So here's the thing. Just real quickly, I've been taking notes, and there's probably too many things to really go into today, because there's like, this is how every conversation is, right? Like you have an idea, but then the conversation moves on, and like you could have gone a different way. So we should probably do this again sometime, because there's a bunch of, and I just really quickly though, I've noticed there's like a trend with you and me on Twitter where I will dig up something that is like truly ridiculous on the left, and you're like flabbergasted. Have you like, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's the one time where it's like, hey, here's an article by some random leftist who thinks that we should abolish nuclear families because it would be better for liberation. And then, see, when I say things like government should be liberal, people should be conservative, I'm looking at, the end result of the March of Progress, where we're now tearing down things that are essential, and we're slandering them as conservative and tearing things down as essential to like human life. And it's like, well, I don't want to do that. I think that nuclear families are actually good. It's good for most people to be in a nuclear family. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I watch your TikTok Tuesday videos. They aren't my favorite, but I think you do.
But you don't have to watch those. They're ridiculous. They're fucking
No,
stupid.
but you show some stuff that's crazy, and it blows my mind, genuinely. So there it is.
Okay. Where could people find you? What would you, if you could, Woo, like pitch anything to my audience right now, to Dev's audience, what would it be?
Get involved with the 2024 election. I'm doing a ton of work with Progressive Victory. We are going to be starting an MVP canvassing house with Destiny very, very soon. I'm really excited about that. Deep canvassing is something we've really learned in the Democratic Party, and this is the way it works. If you have people that are kind of embedded in the community and they're constantly going out to, fish fries and knocking on doors and truly getting to know people in the community and forming those deep relationships, It doesn't just help you win one election, it helps you start to turn a whole community around. And, something Stephen has never gotten credit for is his commitment to electoral politics and really making a difference. I understand why his hot takes get the most attention, but I think underneath that is someone who truly loves this country and wants to do his part. So that's going to be coming up really soon. We're going to have ways for y'all to get involved with that. So I hope that you will. This country's worth fighting for.
Well, thank you, Brianna, for spending some time with us today, and we'll see you next week when we have you
just
on
one
with
thing.
Noah and SDL.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And maybe, Dev, maybe sometime we can play Smash Brothers or something on your stream. That'd be a good old time. Do you play Street Fighter 6?
No. What? I'm playing Project Zomboid right now. Actually, that's the big multiplayer game I'm playing. Is
There we
Project
go.
Zomboid.
Learn Street Fighter 6. My jury's pretty fierce.
Brianna wants to take you to task. Okay, Brianna, we're gonna let you go. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
Okay, what a great
Did you just kick her out, or did she leave?
I moved them off. Move along, right? Once they're done,
okay.
We do what we do. We got to keep it snappy, okay? Efficiency.
Okay.
That's okay.
Good.
So now that I have you here, I won't keep you very much longer, but I do have a couple questions.
We can stay till the end. I mean, there's super chats to do, right?
Sure, yeah, there's super chats to do. But before we get to those, I will ask you this. How do you think that went?
About what I thought. Like, there was definitely some people who were like messaging me and being like, "Don't talk to Brianna, she's a snake," and I'm like, I can kind of understand that point of view because she was crazy 10 years ago, but I've also seen her make the rounds for the past year or so, and she's been very reasonable. Whatever faults she had 10 years ago that created this negative view of her on some parts of the internet, they're definitely she's not who she was, and I kind of knew that it was going to be a much more reasonable conversation, and it was pretty much what I expected.
No, I get you. I think that there's this tendency for us to hang our worst selves onto others, like their worst selves, their worst moments, and that's all they ever are. I can attest that through working with her, right? I didn't know her very much. I didn't know her at all. I didn't talk to her at all during the Gamergate years or things like that. Probably wouldn't have. But she's always been square with me. She's always treated me fairly, and I haven't seen her do anything duplicitous or backstabby or anything like that. If there were snake times before, fair enough, but I don't see them now. I will say that she's genuine when she wants to just work with others, not just because it's just a good thing to do and want to change, but from a pragmatic standpoint, it's just better to build than to tear down. It's better to build bridges like that, and I think that we're working on her. We're bringing her around, so we'll smooth out those.
That's a conservative point of view, Wick. You're not liberating things; you're conserving them.
You know what? My policies that I advocate for, much like you're saying, right, are writ large for the community as a whole. When it comes to my personal stances and things like that, I do believe that we are masters of our own destiny, and we need to take accountability and responsibility for what we do and what we put into the world. And I do think that things are worth conserving. I'm not progressive for progress's sake. I want to progress to certain things, to certain points, to certain outcomes, and I don't think we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater in order to get there. There's just no need for it to tear down when we can reform and rebuild. But I don't know. Let's ask these super chats real quick because Artemis Fowl has been very generous, and I want to make sure that he gets his money worth.
He has that glowy money.
And you know what? I'm here for it. Okay, I'm here for it. $10. The same side that claimed that supporting Israel and Jews in Israel is anti-Semitic, but became amazingly nuanced when it comes to Hamas and the Palestinians who support the killing of Jews. I guess it's not a question so much, but fair.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's so easy to be hypocritical because you can have 18 million different stances on 18 million different topics, and so whatever ends up serving your politics, I think, is what a lot of extreme people do. They'll Like they will here, hold on. I gotta find that exact. Jesus Christ! I think my brain's starting to melt. Let me find it here. Yeah, so basically, they'll claim racism when it cuts one way, and then they'll claim liberation when it cuts the other way. It's
Yeah.
one of those things where it doesn't matter that it doesn't make sense. What only matters is that you say the two statements far enough apart from each other that no one notices.
And this is why I'm harping on this, and I know people are tired of me harping on this, but people are seeing this. Like, we see people, high-profile figures have left very leftist chapters. The DSA has bleeding membership, right, from high-profile members. Like, there's October 7th has created this fissure amongst the left that I don't think we've reckoned with yet. And not just the left, the right's currently trying to decide which it hates more, Muslims or Jews, right? And they're going to fight about that for a while. But on the left, like, we have this there are people who thought we were going for one thing that have realized that, oh no, those memes that the Republicans were trying to make you into, no, that's actually what you actually wanted. And what? And so we have this kind of fight going on right now, but we'll get through it. We'll get past it. But,
Hopefully, yeah.
$5 more. There's nothing more delicious or decadent than to be able to hate with a moral conscience. That is currently the only thing the left offers. I don't think that's true, but fair enough.
That's a Huxley quote.
It is. Well, a bastardized Huxley quote. He didn't talk
Yeah.
about the left, but fair enough. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Is there anything that you thought we should have gotten to that we didn't get to tonight?
My entire list of things.
Oh,
that I wrote
fair
down in
enough.
the middle of
Fair
it.
enough. I thought maybe like something like, was there any like elephants in the room that we didn't tackle that you were like, Wick, I can't believe you didn't bring up this?
No, I don't think so. I mean, a lot of everything was brought up. It's just that I probably had more to say on a topic, but then it kind of moved on. It's like, oh well, that's how it is.
Fair enough.
That's how it is sometimes.
$2 from Testicle Johnson. Vote Vivek 2024. Thank you for the $2. Okay. And if there's nothing else, though, I mean,
Dev looks like a professional Smash player. That's one of them.
oh, there you go. $2 from Artemis Valley. Yeah, I'm looking at him. I do need to get better at reading these things. I need to figure out like either a time where like in the middle of the discussion we can pause and I can just read them all, or at the end or something. But people want to get their question into the discussion, and so I've been trying to figure out the best way to integrate it. It's a struggle, but we'll get through it.
There's definitely like it's good to like have breaks or like minutes where you go to the washroom or something, and then you start checking out the super chats, something like that. That's pretty normal, I think.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on today. Is there anything you want to say before I let you go?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, Brianna agreed to talk again, and we can always talk again.
I will absolutely reach out to you and have you on again for a variety of things. I have ideas. So
I have on my calendar for some reason WhiK 15, November 15. Did you give me a date for anything?
If I have, I'm going to have to check my messages. I document all the things that I invite people to, so I'll have to look.
Do you have anything going on the 15th?
No, but the 16th is when No Opinion comes on. So maybe this is just an aspirational thing that you wanted to come on the 15th for. I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, you know what it might have been? There was that one person on Twitter.
What's their name? I don't remember their name, but
they wanted to talk, but then like it kind of like fell apart. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah. Look. If we still want that to happen, I know that you are tagging me all the time to bring people on to fight you.
It's fine. I'm just like,
no, I can still make that one happen. That one is something that I can make happen. I just don't like on talking to them. I don't know precisely what the issue is. Like with Karl Marx, I knew what you guys were going to talk about, right? With this one, I don't. I think she just doesn't like you.
I think it would be a bog standard socialism is better conversation.
Fair enough.
And I think even as somebody who's not a debater, I think that I could just like kind of walk through that and just be like, yep, here it is. Yep.
But yeah, I'll if you want, I'll reach out to that and see if I can make me happen. I know Sunday's been desperately trying to get you on from anything, but it's funny to watch you tell him no. So
yeah, I just I know he's listening. I understand. Here is your one drop of attention. Here you go. But in terms of, I think her name was Jalen or something. I mean, like, I'm interested in talking to her. It's always fun but I think it wouldn't be a fruitful conversation. I think it would be rehashing why socialism sucks and then coping, and then it would be like, okay, well, there we go.
Those can be fun, and those can be look. We go through the standards, the classics, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
of debates, right? Like there's certain types of content that will always draw views. They're evergreen. Are women bad in the various forms? Gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of views, right? Socialism versus capitalism. That's another one that gets a lot of attention, a lot of views. So there's these evergreen topics. We can always make it work. People are asking, are you going to stream? Are you going to start doing streaming?
No, they're asking me if I'm going to do my gaming stream tonight.
Oh,
so here's the thing. Whenever I fire up Fiber Politics stream, because I'm not a consistent streamer like everyone else in Twitch poll. I do not do that sort of thing. I've thought about it, like streaming every day for Twitch poll, but I don't know if that's me, right? But I do stream once a week, like a weekly news show on Sunday. And whenever I stream that, lowest point I get like 200 viewers, highest point I get like 1,000. So I can do pretty good for myself as a streamer, I think.
very cool.
When I stream video games, I get between like 20 and 50.
Those are WhiK numbers right there, but now it's great.
But like the core viewers love that shit. They love the gaming streams, and they're always tuning in, and so the ones who ask me, "Hey, Dev, where are you? Are you streaming tonight, Dev?" It's always like that core audience, and they're the ones who want the smaller, like intimate streams, and they ask me like every night what I'm doing. Probably not tonight, guys. I think this ran too late, and also I was working on. I was hoping to get the next video out today. It's probably going to be tomorrow at this rate, but I was working on that all day. So I think basically I'm doing the Archcast tomorrow afternoon. So I'll either stream some gaming stuff either before or after the Archcast tomorrow, I think.
Okay. Well, with that, gang, we're going to let you go. Remember, Monday, we're going to have the mental illness stream with Xena, Cherry, and Pixie. Tuesday will be food stamps versus Admiral Gibbs. And then Thursday will be Noah Opinion with Brianna Wu and SDL. So if you guys want to see that kind of content, give me a follow, give me a like, give me a subscribe. That's great. Dev, thank you again, and we will see you later. Bye.
No problem.